My shop is now open! You can get Quinnamin merchandise and these new Amphibia charms over at quinnamin.store. Stick around to find out how you can get free shipping on orders within the US until the 29th of June.
No matter who you ask, every person typically has a few pieces of media that have undoubtedly shaped them into the person they are today. If I were to ask you to choose a handful of things that have significantly changed you and molded your personality, I'm sure the responses would be vast and diverse. As for myself, I've had a plethora of shows, movies, games, and books that have assuredly changed my life, but none of them have stayed by my side day by day quite the way a silly little unassuming Disney show has. That, of course, being Amphibia. Most commonly brought up in discussions relating to the Owl House and Gravity Falls, Amphibia is often swept aside in favor of its sister show and its relations to the infinitely more popular and forever relevant Gravity Falls. But in all honesty, I have a confession to make. This one might be my favorite of the three. Don't quote me on that, it still and probably will forever be fighting Gravity Falls for that title, but there's something so unbelievably special about Amphibia that I'm baffled hasn't been recognized as much as that of other cartoons similar to it. This is one of my favorite shows of all time, and in an era where my life has been completely and utterly dull, revisiting it has not only ignited a spark of happiness deep within my soul, but it's reminded me exactly what makes fiction such a beautiful thing, no matter what form it takes. I'm here today for one reason, and one reason only. To talk about something absolutely near and dear to my heart, and hope that my passion and enthusiasm radiates onto someone else enough for you guys to revisit the series yourself, or even watch it for the very first time. This is a retrospective of Amphibia, and I highly implore you to watch the show yourself beforehand. If you don't have the time or simply aren't interested, that's also completely okay. While I'm not going to be offering much of a plot summary, I will be going over important events in order to better fit my own narrative and analysis of the show. So I would describe this video as relatively beginner-friendly. You don't need to know that much about the show, but some general ball knowledge would probably make the video more enjoyable. The same can be said for the Owl House and Gravity Falls, as they are very important to the world of Amphibia and to each other's worlds respectively. And also, I guess, fucking Rick and Morty too, I don't know. So yeah, a pretty huge spoiler warning for all three of these shows if you haven't seen them. Also, fair warning, I'm going to probably get a lot more emotional in this video than usual, sorry about that. That all out of the way, grab yourself a serving of Choco-Peed pancakes and get comfortable, because today we're delving deep into the murky waters of Disney's Amphibia. The world and story of Amphibia was first conceived by series creator Matt Briley around 2014 and 2015, as Gravity Falls began to come to a close. Matt had worked as a storyboard artist and director for Gravity Falls, a show that infamously boosted many careers for creatives working on the show, notably names such as Dana Terrace. Alex Hirsch planted the idea of Matt pitching his own show in his brain one night, and as such, the Amphibia seed began to sprout. Matt's passion for the show was evident from the very beginning, as the world of Amphibia was very quickly and lovingly conceptualized, shown through a wide variety of early concepts. Originally pitched as Amphibia and later changed to Amphibia Land, we can see that the core concepts of the show stayed true: a rugged human girl and her pink frog companion. There is a lot of interesting pre-production information available for Amphibia, and of course the art book provides many conceptualizations. I would seriously recommend picking this book up if you're a fan of the show and haven't already. Early pitch decks and sizzle reels reveal more insight into the original story, and we know that the the grungy fantasy element was actually toned down pretty significantly as demanded by the studio. Funnily enough, as a result of the Loud House's success. Higher-ups were very harsh surrounding the dark fantasy approach to the world, directly telling Matt that everybody loves the idea of a girl stuck in a frog world. They just don't love what you've done with it. And as such, 8 months were spent workshopping Amphibia primarily into what it is today. The original core concepts made it into the final version, but certain characters and plot points were scrapped entirely, while the early versions of many important characters were very, very different.
Oh, that's...
Most infamously, Sprig's original name being Weed, leading to some pretty hilarious internal notes such as my personal favorite, Anne has grown to love weed, though she would never admit it. Me too, buddy.
Guys, I'm not even fucking kidding. This is the scariest thing I've ever seen.
Years of love and labor were finally realized on February 19th, 2018, when Amphibia was greenlit by the Disney Channel for 20 episodes alongside The Owl House. 4 days later, Matt would make a tweet announcing the creation of his very own show, with an image of its main characters attached. Welcome to Amphibia. It's official. We are making a show about a teen girl stuck in a crazy frog world. Please bear with me as I gush and chill harder than I've ever shilled/gushed before. Amphibia is a labor of love that was in development for almost 2 years. Development can be a crazy roller coaster of ups and downs, and I wouldn't be here without the love and support of so many wonderful people. Surprisingly enough, Disney was unusually generous to the show, renewing it for a second season even before it premiered, and renewed it for a third season ahead of the season 2 premiere. As we'll learn later on, however, this generosity did not extend to the actual storytelling elements of the show itself. Regardless, Amphibia would premiere its first 2 episodes on YouTube and Disney Now on June 14th, 2019. And would see their broadcast premiere on Disney Channel 3 days later. Amphibia's initial setup is one of my favorite parts of the show. While the Owl House and Amphibia both share eerily similar fish-out-of-water stories, the introduction to Amphibia's is much more fast-paced due to the nature of the show itself, as well as the fact that each episode consists of 2 11-minute plotlines. The show begins not with our main character, but rather by showcasing the residents of Worldbuilding, a small town in Frog Valley, Amphibia, and our primary location for the greater half of the show. The decision to introduce the supporting cast before the main character here is one I heavily support, as I feel it's executed rather seamlessly. We're first introduced to Sprig Planter, an energetic young frog who intends on proving his responsibility by doing something irresponsible, forever intertwining him with our protagonist, Anne Boonchoy. When Anne does appear, we aren't told or shown how she got transported to another dimension. All we have to go off of by now is the show's intro itself, so we get to ease into the mystery in the show's setup as the episodes progress. By the second episode, we're shown some more context into the show's setup. Anne regrettably steals a mysterious music box, and when opened, it transports her and her friends into this mystical frog world. We're also directly told more about Anne through her dialogue, as she starts to pressure Sprig into doing fun things with her, even if it means putting them both in danger. As her friendship with him begins, we can immediately infer 2 things about Anne's character. She doesn't necessarily have good friends, and because of that, she isn't necessarily a good friend herself. Anne pushes Sprig out of his comfort zone, explaining that that's just what friends do for one another, revealing that she was pressured into stealing the music box by her friends back at home. Rather than simply playing the victim, Anne actively falls into the same pattern of pushiness that her friends had shown her back home, driving in the fact that at this point in time, Anne is rather unfamiliar with how a friendship should be. This is the first of her many flaws to be shown to the audience, and I admire the decision to show this so early into the show. Her relationship with Sprig is by far the most important in the show. The story begins with it forming and ends with presumably the last time they see each other. In the first few episodes, Sprig is the most friendly towards her, introducing her and therefore the audience to this unfamiliar world. Anne's relationship with the rest of her found family has just as strong of a foundation. I love the found family trope! Amphibia Planter, known as Hop Pop, takes a parental role over his grandchildren, Sprig and Polly, and this of course extends to Anne now as well. Anne and Hop Pop have their fair share of disputes at the beginning of the show, and the progression of their relationship feels natural. As an authority figure, most of the plot points with him in it surround this concept of his grandchildren refusing to listen to him in a way that is equal parts amusing as it is frustrating. Hop Pop and Anne's relationship progression is especially strong when paired with the progression of Anne's relationship with the residents of Worldwood. She is outcast pretty heavily, seen as a monster, and this isn't something that is exclusive to 1 or 2 episodes. It's consistent and is very clearly a big sense of insecurity within Anne. She doesn't even begin to earn the town's respect until about 10 episodes in, which, because of the split episodes, is more like 20. Amphibia's first season is almost entirely slice of life, but I wouldn't describe it as filler, and neither would Matt. The episodes serve purpose, introduce characters, and are very clearly thought out with the intention of developing later episodes and plot points. The most notable example of this is in the very first episode, in which Anne's eyes glow blue almost unnoticeably, foreshadowing the extremely important plot point of the Calamity Powers, the Calamity Box, and everything tied to them. A majority of the characters introduced this season return later in a way that feels satisfying rather than just, wow, look, it's this character, they're back. There's nothing I appreciate more than a show knowing exactly where it wants to go from the very beginning, and this is something that the Owl House and Gravity Falls deserve praise for as well. All three of them excel at foreshadowing, parallels, and story progression. A few of this season's strongest episodes, aside from the obvious few to me, have to be Stakeout, Dating Season, Lily Pad Thai, Trip to the Archives, A Night at the Inn, Bizarre Bazaar, and Children of the Spore, because they all feature really unique environments and art direction that is just kind of a treat to watch for anyone with an eye for creativity. And of course, And Theft Auto is iconic for the name. Skipping episodes that seem unimportant can hurt someone's overall perception of the show. Again, Amphibia's first season serves to familiarize the audience with one primary location and a strong supporting cast, building this absurdly interesting world with infinite possibilities. But that isn't to say it's perfect in any way, and definitely has its weak moments and unsatisfactory elements. As biased as I am towards the show, and as much as I love everything about it, I can still acknowledge the criticism levied towards this season as well as other episodes of the show, most notably Season 3A. We'll get there when we get there. The first season of a show should familiarize the audience with its tone and make it clear what it is trying to be. And from brief glimpses of genuine heartfelt moments, character developments, and even its dry, witty sense of humor, Amphibia is very much setting itself up to be a family show, not purely a kids show. It's meant to be enjoyed by many different age groups, and it is. Despite this, its messages can appear hand-fisted and very much directed towards children, although I never felt this to be patronizing or intrusive necessarily myself, with the exception of, like, Anne dabbing. I don't know why she does that so often. Amphibia's biggest setback is its struggle with tonal confusion, and although I am very certain that most of it comes from Disney executives rather than the actual creatives behind the show itself, it still reflects on the finished product, and said finished product shouldn't be immune to criticism, even if my biased brain wants to give it the benefit of the doubt, no matter what. Those who are more selective with cartoons and tend to not enjoy things too outwardly directed at younger audiences can often be put off by the first season of Amphibia, and I think that's completely reasonable. A show should be judged on its hook first and foremost, and for a show with such high stakes and a highly emotional core later on, the majority of the first season feels significantly more relaxed, and doesn't exactly properly set up the tone of what the show ends up being. The season is cozy and comforting, but I actually like that. It's a sense of security. The first season feels unbelievably safe, and a part of that is because the characters are quite literally confined within the comfortable town of Wortwood the entire time. In the first episode of the show, it's explained to us that the mountains surrounding Wortwood are impenetrable for the time of year, and that Anne and the planters can't venture beyond in search of answers until the season clears up. When we do see glimpses of the outside areas of Amphibia, there's a noticeable tonal shift, immediately making the world building outside of Wortwood more enticing. It's almost like world building fantasy edging. Amphibia's world has always been one of its strongest elements, according to practically everyone I've asked. The concept of what is referred to as 3 girls, 3 races works exceptionally well in the show's favor. It's a fresh way to introduce the world of Amphibia while also introducing the human characters and how they adapt to the world. I had to clear my throat, sorry. The episode Prison Break doesn't follow Anne or any of the characters in Wortwood, and it feels a lot more separated because of it. The environment is menacing, and there's a clear contrast between the war-hungry toads and the country bumpkin oafs of Wortwood. Prison Break is the first episode to truthfully have hooked me upon first viewing. Not only is the introduction of another human character lively and compelling, but the differences in her and Anne's environments contrast perfectly, and also give a great reason as to why Sasha Waybright is introduced before the third member of Anne's friend group. The popular mean girl of the 3, Sasha is the best demonstration of why the decision to make these characters teenagers is completely justified. While the characters were originally supposed to be 15, the decision to age them down to 13 and put them in middle school rather than high school isn't a super intrusive one, even if it was done for the stupid reason of Disney wanting them to relate to the audience better, which is amusing considering the changing of their age didn't alter the actual characters themselves in the slightest, but whatever. These characters being young girls is justified just beyond filling Disney's quota. It allows for all 3 of them to be flawed in a way that's not just realistic but also kind of scary. There's nothing more evil and malicious than a 13-year-old girl, and, as I said, Sasha is immediately shown to be the best demonstration of this. While the other two girls have these same irresponsible and alarming teenage girl pitfalls, Sasha is the most apparently antagonistic in her debut episode. She is met with far more hostility than Anne was, being transported near Toad Tower and imprisoned there by Captain Grime, another one of my favorite characters. Sasha not only showcases her ability to connect with others to get them to do what she wants, but makes it very apparent that she does not hesitate to showcase these manipulative tendencies, to the point where a vicious army leader tells her she's too dangerous and manipulative to roam free. Sasha is one of my favorite characters in anything ever, not only because of aspects I'll get into later, but because ever since her first appearance, she's just simply incredibly entertaining to watch on screen. Anna Akana does a fantastic job at portraying this sassy, controlling teenage girl. While the first season focuses on Anne adapting to the frogs and establishing changes for the better, Sasha immediately adapts to the brutish toads of Toad Tower and begins her transformation for the worse. A transformation we get to see on full display in the amazing season finale, Reunion. The first episode to have a full 22-minute runtime, Reunion is exactly what it sounds like. Anne and Sasha reuniting after a season's worth of the occasional build-up. From the first episode, Anne's main goal is to find her friends and escape Amphibia, so seeing her achieve a part of this goal is every bit as satisfying as it is nerve-wracking. The episode begins with our first proper look into Anne and Sasha's friendship back at home, and based on the contextual clues we had received up until that point, it's not surprising the way their friendship plays out. These first 3 minutes perfectly encapsulate one of my favorite aspects of the story: girlhood friendships and all the overdramatic struggles and complications that accompany them. Everything from the stereotypical teen flick music that the episode begins with, to the equally as cliche mischievous birthday montage, the beginning of this episode makes you feel young and immature. It's a very beautiful thing that I feel many people can relate to, myself included. While the two very clearly enjoy each other's company, there's an overlying theme of insecurity within Anne, as Sasha repeatedly encourages her to engage in selfish and sometimes harmful activities for the sake of their own amusement. She convinces Anne to skip school to hang out with her, and when Anne inevitably has to leave to be with her family, Sasha refuses to let her leave, telling her to instead hang out with her friends who love her. We as the audience already know Sasha wasn't the best person when it came to her relationship with Anne, and we know that she's even more manipulative now, but Anne doesn't. Deep down she knows that the way Sasha treats her is wrong, and it very clearly creates feelings of discomfort, but she still tries to convince herself and everyone around her that Sasha is a good person and her best friend. It creates a very entertaining conflict where we know something's up with this scary white bitch, but we're just idly sitting by waiting for her to reveal her true intentions. And when she does, it's rewarding. Anne attempts to worm her way out of the situation without having to actually confront Sasha. She's very obviously upset with her, but prefers to try to sneak the residents of Worldwood to safety rather than risk a potential conflict that subconsciously she knows she can't win. Or worse, upset Sasha. When her plan falls through and she's forced to have that confrontation with Sasha, she doesn't fight back until Sprigg stands up for her on her behalf. His bravery, as well as the distinction between his unconditional support and Sasha's conditional love, inspires Anne to do something she should have done a long time ago.
Standing up to you!
The action in this episode isn't something unseen from the series at this point in time, but it's still fun to watch, whether it be the wacky frog shenanigans or the actual climactic conflict between Anne and Sasha. It's a major turning point for the season, not only in the sense that it catapults the dramatic aspects of the show to the foreground, but creates a new standard going forward for how intense and emotional the series can get during its strongest moments. The main conflict of this episode is literally a planned execution against an old man who the Toads view as a political liability. The themes are admittedly darker than most shows directed towards children, and it all leads up to the first of many momentous and important moments seen throughout the series. The results of Anne and Sasha's battle not only leave Sasha with a physical scar to symbolize the confrontation forever, but leave her dangling off a ledge after Toad Tower begins to crumble. Despite their strife, Anne isn't going to let Sasha fall to her literal death, and when she's about to see herself slip, her newfound family helps her keep her ground, even though it's to save someone who had been trying to murder them only minutes ago. It's a powerful moment that showcases the extent of how much the Planters have grown to care for and cherish Anne, and when Sasha sees the unwavering support that they're giving to Anne, she shows a genuine moment of remorse, telling her that maybe she's better off without her before letting go and falling to her presumed death. Of course, Grime manages to catch her and save her life, but this wasn't something coordinated. Sasha was prepared to literally die after one fight with her best friend because she came to the realization that it was her fault. She felt genuine guilt for her actions, and in perfect dramatic teenager fashion, went to the extreme to make up for it as soon as she saw an opportunity to do so. so. It's a perfect example of the Mean Girls aesthetic that was intended for these characters. Their responses are overdramatic but fitting, and I feel that's something that audiences can relate to pretty heavily. I know I got into my fair share of hilariously moronic catfights in middle school. Here's a real screenshot of my friend getting mad at me. It was dire. The first season of Amphibia isn't perfect, sure. Most things seldom are, but it's an incredibly solid season of television that I absolutely adore rewatching. Beyond the reasons I've already gone into detail about, this season introduces so many of my favorite aspects of the show and does it so seamlessly. I adore every single side character in this show. Not a single one of them ever annoyed me or overstayed their welcome. Mrs. Croker is a charming archetype that never gets old. Ivy makes a perfect love interest for Sprig while still retaining an abundance of individuality. Toadie and Mayor Toadstool bounce off each other perfectly, and I mean, come on, who doesn't love a corrupt gay politician? Maddie is adorably eerie, Loggle has one of my favorite gags in the entire series later on, and Wally is fucking Wally. If you hate him, you're lying, and lying is a sin. You will die and go to hell. The humor is also undoubtedly a high point of the series. A lot of characters have a strange, very morbid obsession with death, and it's really fucking funny in practice. Bill Farmer also consistently delivers some of the best lines in the entire show throughout the season because he is actually amazing and we love him so much. All of the voice acting is incredibly strong, whether it be for actual emotional scenes or just a joke that makes you laugh. Here are some of my personal favorites.
I think I just killed somebody.
It's okay, kids. Just pick a corner for me to pass away in.
No! We are not picking a corner!
I don't feel safe.
I'm from the same town as you, buddy.
Oh! Great!
What can I say? Just how I do. Up top.
Yes.
And that's how you fix a door.
Good job.
It's good. Season 1 aired in rapid succession with a new episode airing almost every day. The longest breaks were typically between 3 and 4 days, and the season was wrapped up within a month. The wait between Season 1 and Season 2, however, was slightly over an entire year, and Season 2 was born during the pandemic, so of course, production was much slower. Even without COVID throwing a curveball, Season 2's production was heavily ambitious. New locations, new crossovers, and new characters created a multitude of production challenges that often weighed on the team. With Season 1 ending on such a high note, and the expectation that Anne and Sasha's quarrels aren't over yet, changing the status quo of the series, the second season was fairly well anticipated, and for a lot of people it would be hard to top the Season 1 finale. Season 2, however, is widely regarded as the best season of the show, the absolute high point, and upon viewing it, it is very easy to see why. The season starts out strong with a return to the episodic structure with a road trip plot, where we actually get to travel outside of Wartwood and explore more of this bustling world in fun and unique ways. We get to see the first of ancient amphibian technology, something that comes back later with the introduction of Frobo, Polly's robot companion, and are introduced to another amphibian species, this being the Ohms. Also, Wax Museum is one of the best episodes of a television series ever purely for the appearance of fucking Frog Seuss. It's also entertaining to see a version of Stan that doesn't have the twins or his brother as an anchor. He's just completely devoid of soul here. While the season's full of plenty of important episodes, it doesn't neglect or take away from the less important, more episodic ones. Every episode of this season counts, and looking back, I really can't think of a single one I would want to skip upon rewatching. There is so much love and effort put into the production of even the smallest details, and it's no exaggeration when I say this is an absolute behemoth of a season for animation, especially considering the less than ideal circumstances it was produced under. The first 5 episodes before we arrive at Newtopia are fantastic, fun, and introduce more of this fantastical world. Amphibia's inspirations really get to shine here, as we get a feel for how media like Ghibli films and The Legend of Zelda have really impacted and molded this universe into what it is. We also aren't left in the dark about Sasha and Grimes' whereabouts for long after the literal Season 1 cliffhanger, as we get to see them again only 4 episodes in, and it's another one of my favorites of the whole season, not only because it establishes their relationship further, but because it's so fucking fun. Grime is an amusing shell of his former self. He's lost his army, his will to fight, and spends the majority of his time getting drunk, watching reality television, and growing a beard. It's not only hilarious, but important to his character, establishing pretty early on that Grime really does have a more tender, soft spot, especially with the way he handles Sasha in this episode. The last time we saw Sasha, she was ready to literally die to make up for the mistakes she made and how she'd hurt Anne, and here we see her grappling with the fallout of their relationship. It shows how complicated and well thought out her character is. She very clearly cares for Anne and does genuinely consider her a friend, despite her mistreatment of her. Her tendency to be a horrible person doesn't come from a place of malicious malicious intent. And whenever she does something bad, she does it for her friends because deep down she truly believes it's what they would want. Back home, she was always calling the shots, getting into trouble, and causing chaos with her friends. And even when it was disruptive or wrong, all three of them were clearly having fun. This episode also helps to establish her obsession with having control. Someone who relishes in control isn't necessarily someone who needs control over people, but Sasha also obsesses over the need to control herself, how she's perceived, and how she perceives others. Yet this need to control extends to other people and turns toxic quick. But it's not because Sasha is inherently evil. The introduction of Yunnan here is also perfect. She is a delight to watch whenever on screen, and her chaotic and eccentric personality shines through, making her the perfect plot device to throw Gribe and Sasha back into action. Also, she does JoJo poses, so that counts for something. Not only are these episodes a fun and enjoyable setup leading up to the planters arriving at Utopia, but when they actually do arrive there, the audience is rewarded with a bustling new environment. And of course, the introduction of a very important character. It's time to talk about Marcy at the Gates, the 6th episode of season 2. Oh boy. If Prison Break was the episode that got me hooked on this show, Marcy at the Gates is what made me absolutely fall in love with it. And I know for a fact I'm not alone in that sentiment. This episode serves as the debut of Marcy Wu, the third and final friend of the human trio, and she is also literally everyone's favorite. Aside from the importance of her characterization and the absolutely amazing handling of her character, Marcy is simply a joy to watch on screen no matter what it is she's doing. While far from unproblematic, as all the girls have their flaws, Marcy is easily the most pure of heart. The best word I could use to describe her is just adorable. Just listen to her noises, dude. I fucking love this thing.
Ow! Oh! Oh! Boom! Ow! What? Oops, okay. Oh! Okay. No!
Undoubtedly, Marcy is the fan favorite. Almost every single person I know who likes this show has told me that she is their favorite of the three girls, and while I could argue the main reason for that is because of her deep characterization and the struggles she grapples with later on in the series, most people start simply imprinting on her from the very moment she appears because she's delightful, and that's probably because that was the intention. While Anne has to blossom into maturity and improve to adapt to her surroundings, and Sasha seems to be impacted by Amphibia for the worse, Marcy is flourishing since day one. Not only did she land in what is essentially the capital of Amphibia, but she very clearly climbed the ranks due to her experience role-playing and playing a shit ton of video games. She quite literally LARPed her way to the top, and if that isn't the most lovable thing you've ever seen, I don't know what else to give you, dude. Sorry, I got sidetracked. Back to my point. Marcy is very obviously intended to be as enjoyable of a character as possible. It's no secret that later on Marcy is the subject of a lot of mental and physical anguish, primarily on the receiving end, sure, but she also dishes up her fair share of misery towards others. So the majority of season 2 is evilly enough spent getting the audience to absolutely fall in love with this character. When Sprig is immediately suspicious of her, it reflects the emotions of the audience, and over the course of the season we can tell Marcy is clearly a trustworthy ally with good intentions. This nerdy, very clearly neurodivergent, but we'll get into that later, oblivious, clumsy goofball gets handed plot points that further develop her and get the audience to connect with her as much as possible, only making her inevitable pain more impactful and heartbreaking than I feel that could have been with any other character. But again, we'll get into that later. I have a lot to say about you, Marcy Wu. Just be patient. Marcy at the Gates also introduces two other important characters, one being Lady Olivia, the newt equivalent of Caitlin Kieranman, and the other being incredibly important, although he barely appears, only having a spoken line at the end of the episode. From the very first time we see him, King Andreas is set up to be an overarching villain. The menacing delivery of his first line, his mysterious demeanor, the fact that he's voiced by fucking Keith David, it practically screams villain to the rooftops, making it a charming surprise when he's not outwardly evil towards our main cast, instead being a massive goofball with a clear friendship between him and Marcy. When he's on screen, we know things aren't as they seem, but our suspicions are hardly realized aside for a few moments of foreshadowing. It makes him an immediate point of interest to the audience, and again, who doesn't love Keith David?
Who are you talking to? Who the? What? Who? What the?
Every single episode spent in Utopia is fucking fantastic, from the funny hijinks to the surprisingly heartfelt moments that admittedly got me pretty choked up. We get to see the contrast between Sasha and Anne's relationship and Marcy and Anne's relationship as they're able to spend more time together. While Sasha and Anne immediately get in a conflict, solidifying their place in the Toxic Yuri Hall of Fame, Marcy and Anne are pretty one-note in terms of their relationship. They're healthy Yuri, if you will. The two have their fair share of misunderstandings, sure, but they're typically resolved healthily and within one episode, immediately solidifying that their friendship is much more akin to how a middle school relationship should be, innocent and flourishing. These two characters genuinely enjoy being around each other, and because of that, we get to see their friendship shine across multiple episodes at a time. Aside from stealing the hearts of the audience, Marcy manages to charm multiple characters and build friendships with them that are equal amounts entertaining as they are disastrous. We learn in Scavenger Hunt that Marcy is incredibly socially inept, something that really doesn't take that much critical thinking to figure out. Your Honor, my client pleads autism spectrum. This trait often leads to her trying to impress or befriend people through her intelligence rather than just socializing. And while this is a plot point amongst multiple episodes with different characters, it hits differently with Marcy in particular due to her blatant neurodivergence, which again is something I'll get more into later. After King Andreas examines the music box, we learn that the 3 stones on the box need to be charged within ancient temples in order for Anne and her friends to return home, setting the stage for the rest of the season's progression. Earlier in season 1, we see that Hot Pop hides the music box from Anne, and it's not really elaborated on other than the occasional line from him acknowledging his guilt. When it's time to go back to Wortwood and retrieve the music box, Anne finds out that Hot Pop had hidden his decision to hide the box from her, and is rightfully pretty pissed off, deciding to sleep outside in the cold to be cannibalized at a later date. Hot Pop has a pretty heartfelt conversation with Anne, revealing he's overly cautious because he literally watched Sprig and Polly's parents die in front of him. The two understand each other's viewpoints, but there's a wave of distrust that remains pretty unwavering into the next episode, rather than just being immediately resolved. Even after they talk about needing time in the next episode, this conflict is still brought up time to time, as the theme of mistrust and betrayal throughout this show is pretty strong. More importantly, learning to overcome that mistrust and forgive people even when you don't necessarily want to or aren't ready yet. Doing this through Hot Pop in the second season is a good way to showcase this theme before it comes back even heavier. It's easier to understand in this situation because Hot Pop's betrayal towards Anne is probably the least offensive one. Either way, the first 2 temples are completed pretty seamlessly, and both are clearly targeted towards Marcy and Anne's strong suits, with the first temple testing primarily wisdom and the second testing heart. The second temple features the return of Valeriana, a character that appears in the first season. In her appearance here, she explained that she's the last of an ancient order dedicated to studying the Calamity Gems and their temples. While seeming relatively shady and highly judgmental, she eventually grants Anne the permission to charge the second stone, though it isn't charged fully. While this character's appearances are decently sparse, I really enjoy the time we see her on screen, primarily because she has a design that is incredibly fun to watch in motion. Gotta love characters with tail gimmicks. After the second temple, we get yet another one of my favorite episodes this season, Beryl's Warhammer. Of course, any Sasha-centric episode is bound to be amazing, but this one is especially special because, say it with me, world building! Yay! We get to see the Toad Lords of the other Toad Towers as Sasha, Grime, Percy, and Braddock propose a Toad Rebellion, which showcases more insight into the caste system of Amphibia. If it wasn't obvious by now, the 3 main races of Amphibia are primarily segregated and live very different lifestyles. This is something I want to get into more depth later, as it deserves a whole segment in a more world-building centric section. Anyways, episode good because world building and Sasha in it. Seriously though, I love Sasha in this episode. She's pushy as always and ends up putting her friends in danger because of her own jealousy-induced tunnel vision, offering them what's essentially a safe word only to ignore it when they actually use it.
Sasha, if you take that trait back with you into the real world, you're gonna get in a lot of trouble, I'm just saying.
Percy and Braddock end up abandoning Sasha and Grime because of her behavior, and this is never something that Sasha gets to resolve. She never sees either of these characters again, and while we have reason to assume that the news of her change and whereabouts does eventually reach them, that's still a pretty long while to go thinking your friend wouldn't care if you died if you got what you want. Sasha's shenanigans are never over, however, because in the third temple we finally get to see the 3 girls reunite, and oh my god, I fucking love every single thing about this episode. Marcy and Sasha are adorable together, and Anne's immediate distrust of Sasha is as tense as it is justified. Sasha does exhibit some behaviors that actually do seem to show genuine change and remorse, only to consistently make the same mistakes over and over again. Her characterization in the last few episodes of season 2 is my favorite by a fucking long shot. I want to try not to focus too much about talking about characters in depth because there's a whole section of the video for that, but god, these last few episodes are probably my favorite episodes of television in the entire world. If you give a mouse his comfort sapphics, he'll ask for a tissue to wipe his tears. The dinner and Battle of the Bands are the final 2 episodes before the season finale, and they are very clearly intended to be blissful and the calm before the storm. Of course, we have the dinner to thank for the creation of this promotional art as well. Every single thing about these episodes makes me so happy I'm actually having trouble formulating why and putting it into words because it's so hard to pretend I know what I'm doing and write an in-depth analysis when my only reason for liking these episodes so much is because they are good and make me happy. Okay, I'll try my hardest. The entire show so far has been leading up to these three characters finally interacting. Watching new episodes of Amphibia as they were released was an experience like no other, because the fans got to truly speculate on how these characters' dynamics would work out once they had reunited. Having those dynamics finally be realized was one of the most rewarding experiences I could have asked for as a viewer and a fan, because every interaction between them was a treat from beginning to end. We know that Sasha and Grime have an overlying plan throughout their time in Wartwood, but any feelings of unease are shoved to the side for the time being, for the both of them are too busy being entertaining and carrying the episodes they're in. Grime having to fake charm the planters and being better at it than Sasha is a direct reflection of their dynamic from the previous season. Grime has learned to master manipulation by being endearing and amusing, while Sasha's feelings are clearly more important than their plans of rebellion, showing that she really does care more for her friends, even if that care is only for getting their relationship under control. Rest in peace, Sasha Waybright, you would have loved Jackie Shauna. Battle of the Bands is an especially enjoyable episode because it once again dives into Sasha's affinity for control and being in charge, shown through the, well, Battle of the Bands cliche. Anne writes a song, Sasha thinks it's lame and hers is better, and she's kind of right. But when she realizes that she'd rather just have fun with her friends, the three share a heartwarming performance. These stupid bug costumes make me smile every time I see them. I'm crying. Dude, we're getting the Polycule back together! The song performed by the trio is referred to as No Big Deal, and was actually one of the many pitched theme songs for Amphibia originally with altered lyrics. Amphibia had a lot of potential theme songs created for it, but all of them had lyrics, something that Matt disagreed with so much he claimed he felt like throwing up every time he would watch it. And yeah, it's a good thing he protested as much as he did. Amphibia's main theme is catchy, iconic, and the instrumental aspect of it allows for it to fit in better with the Owl House and Gravity Falls. Plus, the two concepts we have available for what the theme song could have been with the lyrics are,
It's a different world than I've ever known.
they're not very good. In my opinion. I am really happy they went with the decision to put No Big Deal in the show itself though, because the song is really fun and captures that Disney original movie musical vibe perfectly, that fits in so well with this show's themes of girlhood, and it allows for the iconic leitmotif to be used for some really impactful scenes later on. The music in this show is top tier. Of course, nothing in this episode could compare to Grime's astounding performance dedicated to the tranquility of nature that brings the crowd to tears. It's the comic cherry on top of a perfect, comforting episode. Nothing could possibly go wrong from here on out.
This episode has some intense final scenes. It might be scary for younger viewers.
Oh no. True Colors is one of the best episodes of an animated show ever. Not only is its production and existence very important to conversation surrounding serialized animation for kids, but it's also a goddamn miracle we were able to see this episode the way it was intended to be seen. I talk more later in depth on Disney's horrible mishandling of this episode and how it impacted the rest of the series significantly, but for now, all you need to know is the episode was originally scheduled to release May 1st, 2021, but was delayed to the 22nd. The episode aired with a warning accompanying it beforehand, reading that the episode had intense final scenes that might be scary for younger viewers. This isn't the first time a Disney show has aired a warning like this before an episode. I know episode 15, season 3 of The Lion Guard had one, as the episode tackled the concept of death, though that was a Disney Junior show. Neither Gravity Falls nor The Owl House ever aired a warning like this, and those shows portray some pretty messed up shit. While they may be more intense at times on an objective scale, I find True Colors to be more intense simply because its darkest moment is more grounded in reality. Where Gravity Falls and The Owl House primarily focus on more fantastical tension, True Colors' ending feels significantly more real, aside from, of course, the otherworldly portal, therefore the implications are more violent. True Colors stands as the highest rated episode of the entire series, and is an amazingly gut-punching climax to round up the already fantastic second season. As the name implies, this episode focuses on the concept of betrayal. First with Sasha, the most obvious, the second with Andreas as we finally learn his intentions of using the music box to conquer other worlds, and most impactfully, Marcy's betrayal. True Colors is a clear parallel to season 1's Reunion. While Reunion begins showcasing how Sasha played her part in getting the girls stranded in Amphibia, True Colors begins with Marcy's own misdeeds, revealing her selfish intentions behind coercing Anne into stealing the Calamity Box. I know it's an exceptionally easy thing to write, but I adore looking looking back at scenes from a different character's perspective. The girls get ready to travel back home, but of course not even 2 minutes go by before Sasha immediately betrays them, and what the fuck, why is Andreas doing that? I always forget he can do that. And to crash out after Sasha's second betrayal, after she was finally learning to trust her again, is gut-wrenching, and Brenda's song sells these complicated emotions of distrust and hurt flawlessly. I've been on both sides of this conflict multiple times growing up, so obviously I'm biased towards scenes like this, as they mean a lot more to me than they might others. This episode also marks the beginning of Yunnan and Olivia becoming more involved with the plot, which I will never complain about. Besides them simply being my comfort lesbians, these characters never get boring, especially Yunnan. Her war-hungry expressions and fluid movement is eye candy like no other. If I could, I would tattoo every frame of her crawling on the ceiling on myself. Sasha and Anne get another fantastically animated confrontation similar to that of last season's, and when Anne comes out on top and the rebellion is successfully put to an end, both Sasha and the audience realize that the worst is yet to come. At least we get one of my favorite Marsan hugs before the inevitable wave of pain and misery and suffering and pain and anguish. Andreas explains that he's a Viltrumite, and with the power of the music box restored, Amphibia's technology is restored to working order. The stakes are higher than ever, and just when the audience is preparing for an all-out climactic fight between Andreas and our heroes, Marcy interrupts, pleading Andreas to stop as this wasn't part of their plan. This is my favorite scene in the entire show, hands down. There is no competition. Marcy reveals to her friends that Andreas promised to take them to other worlds so that they could have adventures just like theirs in Amphibia forever. Andreas lets it slip that Marcy stranded the girls in Amphibia on purpose, and even when his true nature is out and open, he still maintains his sense of goofiness. Marcy desperately pleads with her friends, explaining that her dad got a job out of state and that they were going to make her move away. If I could play this scene in its entirety, I would. It is perfect. Haley Chu gives a heartbreaking performance as Marcy tries to desperately explain to her friends that she did it for them, so they would never have to grow apart, and they could just be together forever. Though it's clear her intentions are self-centered, her codependency causing her to act in a moment of selfishness and desperation. She tells Anne to look at how much fun they've had, to look at how much they've grown, frantically crying that she gave her this.
I gave you everything!
She's met with silence before falling to the ground. It's a painfully, beautifully realistic scene, amplified by the flawless vocal performances and the massive stakes of their current situation. Amphibia's overlying theme of trust, betrayal, and forgiveness is shown at its absolute finest here. Even though Anne doesn't forgive Sasha nor Marcy after this encounter, the three still fight by each other's side against a common enemy. I really appreciate this confrontation against Andreas, as even though his character is very complicated, and next season we do see glimpses of his core, if you will, in this episode Andreas is just fucking evil. He kills Frobo immediately, doesn't even hesitate to murder a baby, and then immediately after tries to kill a child by throwing him off a building that is currently thousands of feet in the air. Seeing as her relationships with Marcy and Sasha are painfully complicated, it's no surprise that Anne and Sprig maintain the healthiest friendship she has ever had at that point throughout the show. It's Sprig who finally stands up to Sasha in Reunion, and it's Sprig who unlocks Anne's full potential once he's thrown in the face of danger. Anne's transformation sequence is beautifully animated, especially considering the budget it was done with, and the orchestral rendition of No Big Deal amplifies the emotion tenfold. We've seen Sasha's true colors, we've seen Andreas's, and we've even seen Marcy's. This sequence is Anne finally revealing hers. Sprig makes it out alive, of course, and his reunion with Anne is heartwarming. These characters care so much for each other, my teeth are rotting from how sweet they are. Of course, nothing good lasts forever.
I just need to...
The ending to this episode is single-handedly the reason behind both its delay and the content warning displayed at the beginning. It's probably what this show is most known for, aside from the fucking video of Anne as a tooth falling over. We've seen eldritch demons, we've seen the Yowie Triangle threatening to murder 12-year-olds, we've seen an old British man melt his skin away into the ground. But this scene is fucking brutal. Complete and utter silence other than a haunting hum, the light reflecting from Andreas' sword, the sword literally piercing through Marcy's chest. This is a middle schooler, a 7th grader, and she's literally just been stabbed presumably to death through the chest by who was essentially her adoptive father. Andreas' "now look what you made me do." Marcy's apology as what she likely assumes to be her final words. It is heart-shattering. Here is a character that we just spent an entire season learning to adore. We've seen her interact with multiple fan favorites, we've seen her thrive and exist happily in her element, and even at her betrayal, we learn to love her even more through her realistic motivations and the tragedy of her codependency, something that is universally relatable. The narrative knows she is adored, the narrative knows she's flourishing, and the narrative is cruel. As she falls to the ground, Anne and the planters are transported back to the real world, and the episode ends. True Colors was a huge risk for the creatives, and as part of a compromise with Disney, not only was the warning at the beginning added, but the trailer for the third season was shown after the episode's end, showcasing Marcy's fate. I do really wish this didn't have to be done. As exciting as it was to see what would happen next, a good cliffhanger is scrubbed away when you immediately follow up on it. It is impossible to top this episode. While the final episode of Amphibia still makes me cry to an embarrassing extent, True Colors is the best episode of the show. There is no competition. It is a perfect blend of girlish dramatics and world-ending stakes. It toys with the emotions of its characters, and it toys with the emotions of its viewers. This episode is an absolute behemoth, and deserves to be regarded with such high praise in terms of its storytelling and animation, which, thankfully, it is. But still, the attention isn't and won't ever be enough. And I won't be happy until studying this episode is mandatory in every single school known to mankind. Season 2 of Amphibia is where the show saw its absolute peak in terms of fandom engagement as well, seeing as it aired alongside The Owl House. The Owl House was exploding in popularity at the time amongst fandom spaces for pretty obvious reasons. It is literally the heart and soul of a Tumblr kid, and while people began obsessing over it, they were looking for similar things to get into as well. Amphibia shares so many traits with the Owl House, it's honestly a little scary. So a large amount of new fans came flooding in after the Owl House's first season came to an end. Seeing as they were introduced to the series at its absolute high point, a lot more eyes were on the show that weren't just casual viewers. They were invested fans who were emotionally attached and impacted by the world and its characters. When True Colors aired, not only was it a spectacle for being delayed, but it was a universal experience of excitement and shock. I'm sure most people remember where they first were when they first witnessed this 13-year-old girl get stabbed to death. Where were you when Marcy Wu died? It's safe to say that expectations were higher than ever. Not only were there more dedicated fans, but this finale had topped last season's by a long shot. And seeing as season 2 was even better than the first, a lot of people, myself included, had a lot of hope that the third and final season would be even more impressive and memorable. As such, when season 3 began to air, opinions were very conflicted. The tonal shift from the incredibly written and masterfully dark drama of True Colors to the over-the-top goofy hijinks of season 3A is without a doubt the show's biggest pitfall, as it's something that gets even more jarring the more I go back to rewatch it. Anne literally watches her best friend in the entire world get stabbed through the chest by a giant evil dictator, and not even a minute can pass in canon before she cries tears of happiness because she has a fucking internet connection. Season 3A's quality isn't necessarily any worse than Season 1 or even the episodic episodes of Season 2, but it is actively held back by how good True Colors is. It's a case of a season finale being so good that when the next season begins, there's a feeling of slight disappointment that the status quo isn't changed like it was expected to. True Colors made promises that the show itself just couldn't keep. You would expect this episode to be a huge turning point for the series, sort of a wake-up call for our characters, acknowledging that the fun and games is over now, and that the show would likely spend the rest of its runtime exploring these dark themes. But it would be impossible to stay as consistently dark as True Colors because of how strict Disney's influence can be. Again, I'll talk more on this later. I have a lot to say about Disney. Season 3A and Season 2 at times can feel like completely different shows with different tones and goals, but I still like them both for their own respective strengths. I really don't think the sillier episodes of Season 3 are bad at all. If anything, they're some of the funniest and most charming of the whole series. Some of my favorite gags in the whole show are in these episodes. It really is just the initial whiplash that tends to throw me off, but once the dust on that settles, I do thoroughly enjoy these episodes. While Anne is maybe a bit too chipper at times and Hot Pop feels incredibly dumbed down, seeing these characters in a different environment is very fun. While Anne shows a newfound sense of maturity, she still struggles with responsibility and putting her full trust into people, which often bites her in the ass later on. An obvious highlight of this season is the proper introduction of Anne's parents, Ohm and Bee, or Mrs. and Mr. Boonchoy, and her relationship with them. I love familial relationships, and in shows like Amphibia and The Owl House, they are especially important to their respective main characters. Both Anne and her family have to adapt to their newfound dynamic. Anne has undeniably blossomed during her time in Amphibia and is not the same lazy, irresponsible girl her parents thought she was. This, however, doesn't mean she is devoid of mistakes or flaws. The season also introduces a handful of new characters into the mix, and while none of them are particularly as beloved or memorable as the side characters within Amphibia, I don't have a problem with any of them existing. interesting. None of these characters are annoying or actively take away from the story to me, though I also don't have any attachment to any of them in particular. They really do just all serve as new allies to help the main characters return to Amphibia, with the exception of Mr. X and Jenny, who try to throw a wrench in Anne's plans to return. Mr. X is a very divisive character, mainly because of, again, the tonal inconsistency that accompanies him. He's wildly eccentric and comedic, and honestly, I think he's my favorite of the new human cast aside from the Boonchoys, just because of how absurd his sheer existence is. The concept of a government conspiracy nutcase hunting down something they've been trying to prove for years isn't particularly new or original, but the fact that this character is explicitly inspired by and voiced by fucking RuPaul is so hilarious, I could never be mad at it. This guy is literally just RuPaul's self-insert, it's just him. The most enjoyable moments of season 3 come from a reversal of season 1's formula. Much of the comedic aspect of season 1 comes from the fact that Anne, as well as the audience, doesn't know anything about this fantastical new world, which leads to wacky hijinks. This time around, the planters are in an unfamiliar environment that the audience is actually fairly aware of. It's far from an original fish out of water concept at this point, but that doesn't make it any less enjoyable. While the plots are pretty episodic in nature, we aren't completely detached from Amphibia and what occurs while our cast is separated from it. Sasha, after witnessing the stabbing of one of her best friends, starts to realize that her actions actually do have consequences, and steps up into her new role as commander of the rebellion against Andreas. The next time we see Amphibia after this is in episode 7B, Olivia and Yunnan, one of my favorite episodes of the entire show. Like the title suggests, Olivia and Yunnan team up to attempt to rescue Marcy from where she's being kept, and we're updated on her whereabouts. While she is alive, she is very clearly mentally under the weather and isn't necessarily aware of how dire her situation is. There's a reason she's commonly referred to as Drunk Marcy here by the fandom, and it's just as funny to watch as it is a little disheartening.
Okie dokie. Lead the way, Lady Olivia. Captain, yoo-hoo.
This episode's ending is morbidly amazing and still stands as one of the darkest moments in the entire show, made even more monumental with the introduction of one of my favorite characters in fiction, Darcy, a collective of Amphibia's greatest minds and Andreas' ancestors merged into one known as the Core, inhabiting the body of a clumsy child. I won't talk too much about their actual character beyond letting it be known that I absolutely adore this thing, from their design to their voice to their manipulative, snarky personality. I know this is a complaint that literally every single Amphibia fan shares, but I do wish they got way more screen time. This character is just as threatening as they are charming, and the concept of an evil hive mind possessing and picking up on the traits of an idiot 13-year-old girl is so very endearing to me. All the screen time in the world still wouldn't be enough. Froggy Little Christmas is the last episode before the main cast prepares to return to Amphibia, and I feel this episode isn't spoken about enough due to the fact that it is, well, a Christmas special. I think it can be a bit cheesy at times, what with Andreas flying his drone to go kill Anne, but it's incredibly charming in a way that reminds me of cartoon Christmas specials like that of Phineas and Ferb. Anne's relationship with her family, both born and adopted, shines through really well in this episode, through her wanting to make it a special Christmas for her mom and Sprig wanting to get Anne the perfect gift. The ending to this episode is especially heart-wrenching, as Anne writes to Marcy and Sasha's parents to let them know that the two are okay. This is also the only in-show acknowledgement we get at the fact that Sasha's parents are divorced, which, despite being a minuscule detail, explains a lot about her character. As if this episode wasn't warm and cozy enough, it also features an original song from Rebecca Sugar that melts my heart every time. When the main cast does eventually return to Amphibia, the stakes get exponentially higher, and the series shifts to preparing for an inevitable final battle. I've seen a few people who really don't care much for Season 3B, and I can certainly understand their criticisms. When we return to Amphibia, there's definitely an expectation that, you know, things will be taken a bit more seriously considering the state of the world. Andreas has deployed technology to possess the people of Amphibia and extort the land for its resources. Everything looks bleak and miserable, so when the story continues to try and revolve around wacky hijinks and fun situations, it doesn't really work as well as the earlier episodes of this season, because the environment itself isn't very, fun. This section of the show also features what I believe to be the worst episode in the entire show, Mother of Olms. I don't really think it's bad, because seriously, as long as any of my favorite characters are on screen, I would never see it as bad. I could stare at these guys for hours and probably still be entertained, but it is by far the weakest episode. This episode really should have been dedicated to building around the concept of the prophecy and the calamity gems, because the lore surrounding them is really interesting, but it's primarily built upon through Marcy's journal, the official Amphibia physical book, rather than in the show itself. In an episode that literally introduces a character crucial to the prophecy, I feel the time should be spent actually learning more about the prophecy, instead of resorting to gross hijinks for most of its screen time. This episode just feels like a waste of time in all honesty, when it could be used to build upon a very interesting and important concept. You can still have the character of Mother Olm be forgetful and silly and not sacrifice the importance of Amphibia's world building or an episode consisting of mainly gross out humor with little to no payoff. Other than Mother of Olms, this is really only an issue for the earlier episodes of Season 3B, as episodes that focus more on actually recruiting other characters to the rebellion do a much better job at balancing the entertaining comedic moments and high stakes. We get to see the return of characters we were introduced to in Season 1, my personal favorite being Apothecary Gary. I love this guy so much. The Core and the King is another amazing episode that gives us a few more Darcy moments, as well as Andrias' backstory, explaining why he is the way he is now. King Aldrich, Andrias' father, is incredibly goal-oriented, and appoints Andrias to lead the next invasion. We're introduced to Andrias' old companions, Beryl and Leaf. In Leaf's first appearance, we can see her coining the Planter family hunting dance, something that makes an appearance all the way back in Season 1, confirming her relation to the Planters even before it's explicitly stated. When Andrias acquires the music box, his friends mess around with it, and once Leaf holds it in her hands, she sees a vision of the future, learning the devastating consequences of Andrias' family getting a hold of it. She pleads with him not to use it, but of course Andrias can't disappoint his father, and as such she steals the music box, abandoning Newtopia and Andrias forever. At this perceived betrayal, Andrias loses his fucking mind. His father blames him for the box's disappearance, shunning him and telling him he won't join the Core until he's redeemed himself. And Andrias blames Beryl for hesitating to capture Leaf, banishing him to the outskirts of villages. While this episode is good at contextualizing Andrias' consistent hesitation throughout Season 3, I truthfully do think it would have benefited from having a 20-minute time slot similarly to other important episodes. The pacing does feel very rushed, and I would have liked to see more of Andrias' friendship with Leaf and Beryl aside from a single scene or two, as well as delve further into his father's mistreatment of him. Nevertheless, this is still an incredibly solid episode, and I'll never complain about Darcy getting screen time. Newts and Tights, Fight or Flight, and The Three Armies are all incredibly solid episodes as well, setting up the series finale and hyping up the audience exponentially. The beginning of the end is, well, exactly what it sounds like, the setup to the very end of Amphibia. Other than just setting up the invasion of Earth, this episode is also really heartbreaking through its depiction of Marcy and her relationship to Sasha and Anne. It begins with a flashback of her excitedly rambling about her favorite movie, only to be met with blatant disinterest from her friends. It's an unfortunate reality for anyone who's ever been passionate about something to this extent, and is made even more saddening when Anne acknowledges that her and Sasha weren't just ignoring her interests,
We might have ignored her needs too.
to the point where she went behind their backs to formulate the plan to get them stranded in Amphibia. This episode also tackles the show's overarching theme of forgiveness and how difficult it can be at times. When Sasha struggles with the fact that she isn't sure if she's able to forgive Marcy for what she did, Anne explains to her that forgiveness is difficult and can take time, but it's still worth it in the end, calling back to her earlier feud with Hot Pop and telling Sasha to look at what the two girls have now. God damn it. There's a Sasha-shaped hole in my Sasha-shaped heart. Guys, look at them dancing together. Oh my god, they're so funny. I love them. Oh my god. Okay, sorry. Sasha and Anne's introduction to Darcy is fucking beautiful. The environment is masterfully put together, and Darcy's interactions with the girls is so entertaining. God damn it, I fucking love this character. Their plans of rebellion are thwarted, and the episode ends with Andrias finally invading Earth before making way for All In, Amphibia's 47-minute long penultimate episode. Much like True Colors, this episode is an absolute testament to animation and the amazing things that can come from a team of creative individuals. At times, it does feel as if there was so much planned for this episode, and it can sometimes feel like it's all crammed into the span of 40 minutes, but at the end of the day, it is still one of the most enjoyable episodes of the entire series. Seeing as this is the second to last episode of the series, the characters truly begin the endings of their arcs, all rising to the occasion to save the world. A lot of the heavier bits of character development have belonged primarily to the main human characters or our antagonists, so an aspect of this episode that I especially appreciate is the characterization given to the Planters, more specifically Sprig. Watching this family that we've spent seasons learning to love stand up against the very monsters that murdered their own and traumatized them all, utilizing the pre-established Planter family hunting dance, is exceptionally heartwarming. Sprig in this episode especially made my heart audibly clench, as he's forced to come to terms with the fact that he may very well never see Anne ever again after the return to Amphibia. All In starts to really hammer in the themes of change and acceptance of said change, as each character grapples with change in their own way that relates the most to their storyline. Anne learns to accept change by acknowledging her previous lack of self-identity, humanity, accrediting it to the fact that she didn't truthfully love herself, and she allowed Sasha and Marcy to walk over her at times. And yes, I said Sasha and Marcy. It's important to acknowledge that all three of the girls were harmful towards each other in their own ways, and I feel it isn't necessarily talked about as much. One of the earliest sketches we have from Matt relating to Amphibia is a drawing of the three girls laying on a couch accompanied by the text, "It's complicated." It was complicated before the events of Amphibia, and now we get to see how it's complicated during them as well. I think the way I described it to Dags and DMs was, how do you manage a platonic situationship? And I still stand by that. All In's brief flashback segment I feel gives us the last puzzle in the piece of their relationship and what exactly makes it flawed. It isn't just Sasha manipulating her two friends, it's Sasha being a control freak towards Anne and Marcy, Anne and Sasha ignoring Marcy's interests, Marcy encouraging and sometimes enabling Sasha's bad behavior, Marcy refusing to admit when Sasha is at fault, and refusing to set proper boundaries. These characters were never black and white, and that's something that I appreciate. Before the events of Amphibia, Marcy is not as bad as Sasha at all, but she is still not necessarily good. For Christ's sake, she throws a fucking dog and All In with no hesitation. Even in Amphibia, when Sasha betrays Anne for a second time, Marcy doesn't stick up for Anne at all, instead advising her to take her words back, saying that they can still fix things. What's so special about All In is that we get to witness these characters letting go of these traits, united against something bigger than them. Anne discovers who she is when she summons all her might to fight against Andreas in his stylishly designed exoskeleton. Anne is, like her Calamity Gem, the embodiment of heart. Over the course of Amphibia, she becomes selfless, she becomes a friend, someone who is proud of her loved ones, proud of her culture, and a being of empathy, even for people others may see as undeserving as such. Her fight with Andreas is just as important as it is phenomenal to watch. The animation is the best seen so far by the series, and the Blackpink playing in the background is the cherry atop the cheesy teenage girl coming of age fight scene pie. I really wish more shows like this utilized licensed music, because to me, I feel a good licensed song can forever cement a moment in the brains of its viewers. This is the second, technically third licensed song to be featured in Amphibia, the other two being Lean On Me by Bill Withers in Reunion when Sasha lets go of Anne's hand, and Rather Be by Clean Bandit featured in the show's sizzle reel. And even though I actively listened to all three of these songs before Amphibia's existence, I will now forever associate them with this show I've grown to adore. Andreas' eventual defeat is yet another scene from the show I hold near and dear to my heart. Leaf's message here shows the theme of change the most directly, as she addresses Andreas and encourages him to not close off his heart, stating, "We spend our lives afraid of change, but after many years, I realized the beauty of life is the change, and through it all, I had such wonderful memories of you." Andreas' voice when he realizes it's too late for him is one of my favorite examples of voice acting ever.
All this time, I thought you had forgotten me, like I tried to forget you. My dear friend.
The mix of regret, guilt, misery, fury, it all showcases Keith David's talent in full force. What a national treasure. This scene is also the direct confirmation of Leaf's relation to the Planters, also revealing that she was the founder of Worldwood, the main location for most of the series. For a character with such few moments of screen time, Leaf is incredibly important to the events of Amphibia, and I do appreciate her inclusion. Also, she's adorable, look at her. Andreas himself is just amazing in this episode, aside from only his fight with Anne and eventual acceptance of his defeat. We get to see his relationship with Marcy, and can infer that his friendship with her was never false in the beginning. Marcy brought back the joyful side of him that had been presumably lost for so long, and actively bided time for her survival when the Corps recommended instantly killing her. Andreas did care for Marcy, and Marcy cared for Andreas, confiding her deepest secrets to him. Their relationship was never superficial, which makes the pain and suffering Andreas eventually causes for Marcy all the more heartbreaking. Of course, everything that's fantastic about Andreas' fight also extends to Sasha's fight with Darcy. Darcy's movements are so incredibly mesmerizing, they have such an amazing character design, it makes me want to squeal every time I see it. Sasha's final confrontation with Darcy has her confronting the consequences of her past head on. Her triumphing over Darcy proves that she's changed, and it's a satisfying climax to her character arc as she spits in the face of who she used to be, before ultimately saving Marcy from the clutches of the Corps. I know the end of this confrontation tends to cause people to question how powerful Darcy is, considering that she can be defeated only by slashing their cord, but keep in mind that when Sasha cuts their cord off, it's only after Grimes' arm is amputated completely, and Sasha literally gets her back split open because of Darcy's mind manipulation and ability to literally change the surroundings to distract her. Darcy is absolutely a threat. The whereabouts of Marcy during All In also have her directly addressing her fears of change, when the Corps offers her a fantasy featuring everything she could have ever hoped to have in in life, yet she rejects it in favor of reality, even when she acknowledges that reality hurts. She puts her faith in her friends, and when she's eventually saved by them, we get a scene that makes my heart swell every time I watch it. This is a moment these characters worked so hard for, yet there's hardly time to bask in this victory because the characters' troubles aren't over just yet. Every character reaches their true potential here, even the characters introduced this season that didn't get to have as many impactful or interesting moments up to this point. Anne's parents blossom into fully fledged warriors with the help of Mr. X, the absolute badasses they are. These characters are especially important to me because they remind me so much of my own supportive and loving parents, and the relationship with Anne is so important. They were rightfully pretty off-put by the Planters in the first few episodes, but eventually accepted them as their own, and every scene with them in it is an absolute delight, whether it be an impactful and emotional moment or just them dicking around. Anne Boon Choi, from one troubled kid to another, you won the family lottery. All In is a fantastic episode of a fantastic show, setting up a fantastic ending. Again, this episode does have a few issues, primarily with its pacing, but every time I watch it, I genuinely can't be bothered to really care. It's like my ability to criticize just flies out the window. I start having too much fun and my emotions go absolutely crazy. And at the end of the day, isn't that all that really matters? Watching this episode air live with my family of diehard Amphibia fans was one of the best nights of my entire life. All of us were super into it, just enjoying the action, gasping at the important moments. Good television brings people together, and this is one of the shows that did just that for me. I cried so hard when Amphibia ended that my mother had to hold me and tell the rest of my family to be gentle with me for the rest of the week. Oh, right, the ending. I have to acknowledge that this show ended now, don't I? Damn, letting go of a show you love so much can really be the hardest thing. The final episode of Amphibia is probably my favorite ending to a cartoon since Gravity Falls. Unless BoJack Horseman counts, but I mean that's impossible to compare to literally anything else. It's on its own plane of existence. This episode could be criticized in a vein similar to that of the criticism occasionally levied towards All In the sense that it feels like there are a lot of things that either could have been elaborated on in a previous episode or are sort of crammed into this episode, but I seriously cannot complain. The final battle between the girls and the core is fucking perfection. The animation is jaw-dropping, the absolute best in the series. TJ Hill's score is as fantastic as ever, with an orchestral remix of No Big Deal playing as the main characters harness their calamity powers and get these killer magical girl designs. Andreas also sees the end of his arc here, as after centuries of bending to his ancestors' will, he finally stands up to the core, paralleling the very words that Anne told Sasha when she first stood up to her. It shows the direct connection these two characters have. They both lacked a sense of identity, but where Anne learned to love herself and discover who she was inside, Andreas continued to follow the core's orders, ultimately bringing pain and destruction to thousands. Even though he learned to fight back at the very end, the damage had already been done, and his friends would never be able to see the changes and improvements he had made. Disney's grip over Amphibia has undoubtedly changed a few things about the way that it's presented. After True Colors, the team had to be very careful with what they could get away with, and some things were altered from their original plans, such as Andreas' injury being far less intense. That's why I was genuinely surprised at the decision to actually kill off Anne in this episode, especially considering that when watching it live, it cut to commercial right after, and amusingly enough, some airings mistakenly aired the credits right after her death. Keep in mind that at this point in time, the Owl House finale hadn't aired, so I wasn't aware that was, something they were allowed to do. Even though the audience knows there will be a workaround for Anne dying, it really doesn't make it any less heartbreaking, especially when we see the reactions of the other characters. It truly marks the end of Anne's arc, showcasing that she has not only blossomed into her own person, but cares so much for her loved ones that she is willing to literally sacrifice her life at 13 for them. I always think I'll be able to survive this episode without crying, and then the scene where Sprig flies up to space and holds Anne's hand plays, and I lose my fucking shit like a baby who just figured out how to cry for the first time and decides to dedicate the next 5 years of its life doing literally nothing else. That has been me since the release of this episode. The introduction to the Guardian is probably the most out of place thing in this episode, but I still love it. Again, this probably would have felt more natural if it was alluded towards before. Another reason why I'm mad at the existence of Mother of Olms, because they could have hinted at that more there, and also, maybe foreshadowed the fact that one can harness the power of all 3 stones in the first place, but it's whatever, I'm not that mad about it. Anne is offered the position of a literal god, yet rejects exit in favor of just living her life now that she knows who she wants to be. And of course, a child as an all-powerful benevolent being doesn't seem to typically end well for most Disney characters. While she's offered the choice to accept the position after death, perhaps because of an overdose at the age of 37, we never get a concrete answer to whether or not she will actually accept. Either way, Anne is granted another chance at life, as the Guardian made a copy of her body right before it perished. It's pretty existential, but hey, I have absolutely adored all of the angsty fan content that has resulted from this narrative decision. Also, the Guardian appearing in the form of a cat is very cute, especially when it recontextualizes a line spoken by Anne earlier in the season.
Listen, Domino is not just a cat. She's the Alpha and Omega, an interdimensional being beyond all time and space.
Now it's time for the hard part, saying goodbye. After Anne harnesses the power of the stones, they're unable to traverse from world to world, only being given shards by the Guardian to return home one last time, meaning our characters have to say goodbye to the world they and the audience have grown so attached to. I really appreciate Marcy's farewells especially, as she acknowledges that she didn't really make much of an effort to befriend Olivia and Yunnan as she was so caught up in the fantastical world of Amphibia. Andreas also doesn't receive fully fledged forgiveness from her. His redemption is acknowledged, but Marcy never explicitly forgives him or even says much to him other than goodbye. Again, this plays into this theme of forgiveness, and understanding that yes, not everyone needs to be forgiven so long as you're still mature and kind. All of these farewells make me tear up every time. I don't think I will ever be able to watch Anne's goodbye to Sprig without bawling my eyes out, and there's plenty of evidence to back that up. As if this goodbye scene didn't already have my face drenched in tears, we are then given an obligatory cartoon finale time skip, presumably a few months into the future, and are shown the future of Worldwood and all the characters we've grown to love so dearly. The attention to detail here is everything. Sprig keeping the leaf that fell out of Anne's hair and the Tygo napkin from Earth, Polly embracing her newfound love for mechanics and technology, Ivy having the courage to wear her hair down when she had expressed previous insecurity about it, Toadstool passing down his role as mayor to Toadie, Wally letting down his hair to signify his relationship with his father likely improving, Olivia and Yunnan happily married, yay Newt Kate Vi, Andreas finally aging and tending to the land he once worked to destroy while he wears pins paying homage to Marcy and Leaf and wields Barrel's hammer, the Stumpy's restaurant still embracing its Thai influence, Hop Pop growing avocados, and of course one of my favorite gags in the entire series, Loggle losing all of his muscles after taking a single cheat day. Anne's influence on Worldwood and all of the frogs residing there is clear as day. But of course, the show still has one final full throttle punch to the gut left in store for its audience. We get yet another time skip, this time 10 years into the future, and we get to see the fates of our most important and adored characters. Despite their progress, the girls still maintain their most important traits. Sasha is still rough around the edges, Marcy is clumsy as ever, and Anne has fully embraced a life of herpetology. When 2 seasons prior, it was established that she despised frogs before Amphibia. These characters, though having drifted apart in the past 10 years, still maintain a bond like no other. While Marcy had moved away, Anne and Sasha still went to the same high school, yet drifted apart regardless. And I know this is a decision that a lot of people were somewhat confused about. Undergoing so much trauma at a young age, trauma that they likely just weren't allowed to talk about with anyone other than their families, one would assume these characters would have a trauma bond like no other. However, I have to disagree. Not with the fact that they would be bonded through this trauma, but with the fact that they should be. I think even if it's seen as a less realistic approach to their future, it's necessary, because Amphibia makes it incredibly clear that this is a story about change, and change sometimes means letting things go. Just because those things aren't exactly the way that they were once doesn't mean they're any less important to who you are as a person. It doesn't make those experiences any less valuable. At the end of the day, these 3 girls, despite everything, aren't tethered to each other anymore. They aren't dependent on each other for happiness, and that is the most healthy a relationship can be. In Marcy's own words from her journal, it's not as tragic as it sounds. In fact, it felt normal, healthy. It didn't mean we loved each other any less. The lack of permanence in this relationship is what makes it so beautiful. And hell, who knows? We have no idea what happened to them after this time skip, other than the fact that Marcy stayed at Sasha's place and said she'd consider staying in LA now that she had a job that wasn't dependent on a specific location. And yes, in case you didn't know, her job is creating a webcomic called Amphibia Anne that gets adapted into a TV show. It's cute stuff. So who knows? Maybe these characters do get there happily ever after. Maybe they do all live together and restore their powers and return to Amphibia and get married there and adopt frog children or some stupid shit like that. It's the uncertainty and ambiguity that makes this ending so strong. A show like The Owl House got its happy ending. Those characters and that world deserved it. Luce and her mother are able to freely travel between worlds, and it's a beautiful ending to a beautiful story. But Amphibia needed this bittersweet ending. Amphibia needed to tell a story of forgiveness, growth, and change. And for it to have ended in a different way, these lessons may have been lost. These characters will carry the heart of their companions wherever they go. Stories like this need to be told. Endings are difficult. It's impossible to please an entire audience with a conclusion to a story, especially when that story has been going on for years. But I think Amphibia has one of the greatest endings to a show yet, and I couldn't watch it without crying if I tried. And I tried. Many times. Amphibia's ending is so impactful because I feel like the more the audience changes, grows, and matures, the more the ending starts to resonate with them. That is what makes a good ending. The fact that years later it will still remain in the hearts and minds of all who experienced it, especially if they watched it for the first time as a child. This show means so much to me. And to so many people, and I can't wait to see what's in store for this universe next with the release of the upcoming spin-off comic. Thank you, Amphibia, for everything. Okay, Jesus, sorry. I needed a moment. Fun fact, I've been writing down how many times I've cried during the production of this video, and it is currently in the 20s. I really like this show. And I know I just explained why I like this show so much for like probably an hour, I don't know how long it is, but please allow me to give you an offer you simply can't refuse. I get to talk about Amphibia longer, and you get to listen. Sound fair? Okay, good, cause you don't actually have a choice. Sorry. When I think about what makes Amphibia so beloved to me specifically, my mind immediately goes to its stronger than steel cast of characters. So why don't we take a look into each of the most important characters and talk about why exactly I think they work so well. That's right, it's character analysis time. Yay! A show is, more often than not, only as strong as its protagonist is. Thankfully, Anne is one of my favorite protagonists in literally anything ever. Her growth is just as real as it is important, not only to the show, but to the audience as well. No matter what demographic you are, there are many important lessons to learn throughout Amphibia, most of those lessons being learned through the lens of Anne herself. While many morals can feel hand-fisted in the first season, I've always appreciated the narrative decision to not just make Anne naive and obnoxious at the start, but also downright not that good of a person or a good friend most of the time. While many protagonists start out flawed, they're still for the most part good people. In Anne's case, at her beginning, her flaws tend to overtake her strengths. She shows little concern for her surroundings and even the family that took her in out of the goodness of their heart. She's disrespectful towards the head of the house and disrespectful to most things and people. And it all comes from a sense of immaturity that is painfully realistic. I've said it before, but there really is nothing more scary than a 13-year-old girl. Unlike her other two friends in the beginning of the show, Anne seems to struggle from an apparent lack of identity, something that is directly acknowledged when she's assigned a paper for her to write on who she is, something that she avoids doing, much like how she would avoid doing anything else. In the beginning of Amphibia, Anne's only real character traits are being lazy, a goofball, and a pushover. She slowly learns to stand up for people in Worldwood, but still struggles to stand up for herself until her newfound friends push her in the right direction. Her character growth is far from quick, as it remains pretty stagnant throughout most of the first season. Anne's ability to change and stand up for herself is only one half of her development, the other being her struggles with forgiveness. Anne is being consistently betrayed by the people around her, but has the heart to not only forgive them, but acknowledge the fact that forgiveness will take time, and even if that forgiveness is granted, it doesn't mean that things will simply go back to the way they used to be. Boundaries have to be set, and dynamics could very well change forever. I think this message especially is one of Amphibia's most important themes, because it goes hand in hand with the show's overlying theme of change and learning to accept it. Sometimes friendships and relationships change, and often that change is a result of friends breaking each other's trust. While Sasha and Marcy's characters are more interesting, it's because they already know what they want from their new environments. Anne is the perfect fit for the main character because we follow her journey and watch her become her own person and her own character. Of course, Anne's character development is only as realistic and well thought out as it is, primarily because of the existence of Sasha. Sasha is just as much a part of the heart of Amphibia and its themes as Anne is. To some degree, Anne in most of season 1 is Sasha. Her behavior, her pushiness, and lack of understanding in terms of boundaries is Sasha's influence shining through her. When the divide in their friendship becomes apparent, Sasha doubles down on these behaviors, while Anne learns to distance herself from them. Sasha and Anne's relationship shares a lot of similarities to another relationship from a different cartoon, being Catra and Adora from She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. I bring this this up only because it contextualized to me better what makes Sasha and Anne's relationship so special, specifically in Sasha's character. Both of these relationships follow childhood friends to enemies to rekindled friendship dynamics, and the actions of Sasha and Catra are pretty extreme compared to your typical friendship breakup outbursts. Sasha and Catra are both focused on their goals before their relationships with others, and both get so much worse before they get better. Of course, Catradora is inherently romantic in nature, while Sasha isn't, but I think that makes their bond even more important. Their platonic relationship runs so deep it parallels literal soulmates. The biggest divide between Catra and Sasha, however, and what brings me to my next point relating to Sasha, is how their redemption is handled. While Catra's dependency on Adora shows through her more stereotypical redemption by Adora's side, Sasha's redemption is completely independent, although it still isn't perfect. Sasha's redemption is typically regarded well amongst the fandom, but there are a lot of glaring issues with it, again similar to Catra's redemption. Sasha's road to redemption truthfully begins in Reunion when she first acknowledges that Anne might be better off without her. She has a brief moment of self-reflection, only to let her own guilt and anger override any feelings of actual motivation to do better. In the latter half of season 2, Sasha verbally acknowledges that she doesn't want to change. Her lack of growth comes from a refusal rather than an inability to change, and I do think she should have held on to the sentiment at least a little bit. I don't think that Sasha needs to change who she fundamentally is in order to see positive growth, which relates to my biggest issue with her redemption in season 3. First of all, when Anne reunites with her, there is not nearly enough time spent rebuilding their friendship. The last time they spoke, Anne swore their friendship was over, told Sasha she was a horrible person, and literally tried to kill her. That isn't the kind of encounter you just casually gloss over the next time you see someone. My main issue with Sasha's redemption, however, is that at times it feels like her growth comes purely from her adopting Anne's traits. In Ohmtown Road, while she stands up for the Ohms, reflecting her own insecurities about second chances, this trait is objectively something that Anne in particular is known to exhibit, and of course, Sasha shouldn't be banned from standing up for people just because it's a trait that Anne has, but this interaction specifically is confusing, because Anne would objectively have the experience and right to speak on the topic of forgiveness from the perspective of a victim, whereas Sasha doesn't really have the right to decide when other people should forgive someone. This interaction would be more in character for her if it was more obviously coming from a place of insecurity. Her actions in this episode also directly conflict with her later on questioning if Marcy is worth forgiving. These conflicting views I feel should be addressed and shown to be flawed. It's the same issue I have with a character like Stolas from Hell of a Boss. I feel the show would benefit from addressing these characters' hypocrisy and making it an integral part of their actual character. And if that was the intention, either I'm stupid or it wasn't properly portrayed to the audience. Regardless, Sasha shouldn't have to be more like Anne in order to be a better person just because Anne had to be less like Sasha for her development. Anne just needed to be a little less like Sasha because she wasn't her own person. And them being different people who handle things in different ways is important to what makes them distinctive. Don't get me wrong, I don't dislike Sasha's redemption at all. For one, I think it was handled far better than Catra's, especially when it comes to the reactions of people around her. What makes Catra's redemption so weak to a lot of fans is the fact that this character had been causing pain and suffering for the main cast for literal years. Yet after one good deed and a personality that is hardly improved, everyone responds by infantilizing and immediately accepting her. It makes it feel like this character was an intended villain who got thrusted into redemption because the writers liked her and wanted to canonize Catradora. The only reason I bring up Catra again is because it's through her writing flaws that Sasha's strengths especially shine. Sasha is never portrayed as a character who is inherently and entirely evil, and the show doesn't revolve around the concept of the main characters fighting against Sasha. In the original version of Amphibia, it seemed that this approach was going to be taken, and that most of the conflicts would come from Sasha sending toads after the main cast. The decision to not portray her in this way, however, was likely intentional when her character molded into how it is today. Sasha is not supposed to be evil. She's not even supposed to be selfish. She does selfish things, but ultimately doesn't try to worm her way out of a situation that'll end badly for her. There are two pivotal moments in which she literally accepts death at the hands of her friends. Those actions were inherently selfless. My point is, Sasha was always shown a chance at redemption. She was never expected to stay evil forever, especially considering the fact that she is literally a child. Even in True Colors, when she expects to take over Amphibia, she doesn't intend nor want for it to literally crumble, and when a greater power seeks to destroy it and other worlds, she immediately fights back. Meanwhile, a character like Catra purposefully tried to implode the world despite being warned about the consequences. Catra was a villain. Sasha was an antagonist. For Catra to be accepted, she did one good thing after years of pure evilness. For Sasha to be accepted, she did a good thing after a few months of evilness, and then right after doing that good thing, dedicated her entire being into continuing to do good things every single day, consistently serving as a protector. I do wish there was a bit more time taken for certain characters to accept this change, especially Sprig, who has more than enough reason to despise her, although it's likely his distrust of Grime extends to her as well. Sasha's redemption isn't bad at all, and it certainly doesn't help that her season 3 decided design is my favorite of hers by far. I suppose I just wish it had a little bit more time dedicated to it in the 3rd season. Although I suppose watching your friend getting stabbed because of you is typically the wake-up call you need. Sasha's character is incredibly important not just to the story, but to the audience as well. And this didn't click with me as much as it probably should have until recently, when her story became significantly more personal and more relatable to my life experiences. I think most people can say they think of themselves in a negative light. For me especially, I have a very hard time viewing myself as a good person because of the mistakes I've made. There are things I did in middle school that I still take with me despite understanding no one should be represented by the actions they made at that age. A lot of those mistakes were made as a result of a need for control, a need that hurt myself alongside others. A character like Sasha is especially therapeutic because not only is she not written in a way that excuses her actions, but her desire to change as a result of the consequences of her behavior is inspiring. I have a lot of bad traits that I strongly dislike having, and seeing a character go through a redemption arc that isn't just, ah yes, they've been kidnapped by our heroes and now must be forced into goodness, gives me motivation and hope that I could directly change myself as well. And I'm starting to see the effects of that change. 3 years ago, I didn't think I could do anything but fight with people on the internet. Now I spend my time going on walks, caring for my garden, and most importantly, learning forgiveness. Also, look, I got a scar on my face just like Sasha. Now we're exactly the same. A relatable character can significantly impact someone's life. A character's desire to change can inspire that within a real audience. And while Amphibia's cast excels above and beyond when it comes to relatable characters, I think it's pretty safe to say that the most universally relatable and liked character of this cast is undoubtedly Marcy Wu. Marcy is a very special character, both in terms of importance to the actual show and in the sense that she matters a lot to a good amount of people. I've asked both my own friends and strangers on the internet which Amphibia character they relate to or like the most and why, and without competition, over half of the responses were always Marcy, with the runner-ups typically being Sasha or Anne. Whereas the strength of Sasha's character comes from her initial inability to change herself, Marcy's comes from the inability to accept change in general. Before anything else, she is codependent, going to extreme lengths to keep her friendship with Anne and Sasha intact. Marcy's codependency is of course showcased most explicitly through her breakdown in True Colors, but what I also appreciate is how much Marcy's journal adds to her characterization. Through her writing, we can gather that Marcy is obsessed with her girls, her words, not mine, perhaps beyond what is typically considered healthy. For one, the way she depicts her and her friends through her doodles is, what's a good word for it that isn't gay? I can't think of one, but you get my point. After hearing of Anne and Sasha's quarrel, Marcy writes that their friendship is the most important thing, and that she'll do whatever it takes to get it back to normal. When Anne decides to return to Wartwood with the Planters rather than just staying in Utopia with Marcy, though in the show she isn't too appalled, in her journal she perceives this as abandonment, which is what allows her to be manipulated further by Andreas, who explains to her she can fix this friendship if she helps him acquire the music box, so she and her friends can explore whole new worlds. And of course, there's the way she addresses her friends in general, what with her calling Anne my dearest Anne, referring to them both as my loves, having an entire page dedicated to how good Sasha looks, and stating that they belong together forever. And while of course my queer heart can just read this as Marcy totally crushing on her best friends, and I will choose to use this as fuel to the Sasha and Darcy flame, I still acknowledge that this is clearly meant to showcase through Marcy's point of view how dependent she is on her friends. It's heartwarming to see the contrast in how she speaks about them then, and how she does after their reunion 10 years later. As Marcy writes, love is an incredible thing. Its threads allow us to drift apart, but when the time is right, they bring us back together again. Not a day goes by when I don't think of our adventures in Amphibia and the unforgettable people we met there. And hey, if you're an Amphibia fan who for some reason doesn't own this book, here's your sign to go get it. I love it so much. It's everything to me. I read it to my children every night before bed. The point that a lot of people bring up when explaining why they relate to Marcy so much specifically is that her main form of coping with her troubles is escapism. The entire events of the show are catapulted into occurring as a result of her quite literally escaping into a whole different world, not taking into consideration how it may affect others around her, though this selfishness is likely a result of her interests and needs being ignored. While Sasha shares a lot of traits with Catra, I feel Marcy's mentality can be similarly compared to another cartoon character, Luce from the Owl House. Both characters have an affinity for nerdy interests and tend to bring up their favorite forms of media, relating them to how they interact with the people and environments around them. Similarly to how Luce sees fictional tropes in her own life, Marcy compares the dynamics of others to her favorite tropes, such as Anne's surrogate family or Anne's fight with Sasha. The two share an innate clumsiness and desire to explore the world around them even if it's dangerous, and of course, both characters physically escape to another realm in order to avoid an issue instead of confronting it head-on. This is a concept that I don't think I'll get tired of anytime soon. The idea of a nerdy, fiction-loving character finding themselves in a realm suited to their interests, only to find out that it comes with its own detrimental challenges, is an extremely captivating story, and I feel it works well for both of these characters. The reason I bring up Luce is because we do actually get to see the outcome of her feeling she failed her friends. We see that trauma manifest into her being being until she starts to have literal suicidal meltdowns at school because of the things she witnessed back in the Boiling Isles. Luce, of course, gets her happy ending, while Marcy's is bittersweet. She still has to move away from her friends, and being so distant from them probably left her with a lot of time to think on her previous mistakes. As tragic as it is to imagine, she probably acted in a similar vein to that of Luce in season 3 at times, though we can only imagine. Just wanted to plant my Marcy angst into your brains for a second there, sorry. Escapism in particular is something I relate to very heavily, as I directly struggle with a dissociative disorder. Even for those who might not have such an extreme problem with escapism and dissociation, this struggle is something that is universally recognized, especially in younger viewers. Confronting your problems is hard, and sometimes avoiding them can lead to even worse issues arriving. Another trait of Marcy's that was highlighted to me specifically is her passion for the media she consumes and enjoys, as well as the disappointment that follows when the people around you don't share that same passion or even just blatantly ignore and mock your interests. When I was talking about Marcy with my editor and partner in crime, Dags, they sent me a message so heartfelt that I asked to directly source it because of how well I feel it encapsulates what this character means to people. For me, it's just that I find her insanely relatable. There's something about how she's portrayed as this chipper and optimistic force who, to the audience at least, is introduced as someone who can basically do no wrong, or at least never mean to do any wrong. But to the characters, especially Sasha and Anne, when you know somebody for long enough, that isn't realistic, no matter how much you try to mask those flaws. Her codependency on others likely stems from the fact that she never really had anyone who truly cared to know her on a level that was personal to her. She imprints so hard on Sasha and Anne because although they ignore so much about what makes her herself, they're still at least just like around, and when you're in that headspace, that's better than nothing. It's something so true to me with literally everyone I have ever met. I don't think it's unsafe to assume Marcy's parents likely didn't care much about the things she would take interest in, whether it be because they just found it stupid, or felt like they didn't have the time or brain capacity to even start remotely understanding what she likes, let alone why. They'd probably pay attention on a surface level, they'd know what gifts she'd like and such, but they'd never ask her why she'd like them. I didn't know how to express it, but growing up, I believe there genuinely wouldn't have been a better gift given to me at the time than just my parents or old friends just asking me about something I was interested in, and letting me talk about it and engaging in what I was actually saying. That's why Anne's "we ignored her interests, we might have ignored her needs too" line absolutely killed me, even if I didn't express it completely. The two other girls are very well written, yes, but they still kind of fall into tropes. Marcy is someone who you just expect to be a quirky nerd girl, but is then given what I believe to be the most tragic and painfully realistic unraveling in the entire show, to the point where the entire events of it probably could have just been completely avoided if someone were to have talked to her, or even just cared about her beyond a superficial level. I personally don't really know if there are many characters that have been written that have truly resonated with me to that level before, or at least resonated with that side of me. And the thing that really wraps it all up for me is that despite all that, despite having honestly pretty shallow friends, being duped and betrayed by people she trusted with her life, and even after being piloted by an evil god conglomerate, she's still this unfading beacon of optimism and joy. She undeniably suffers the absolute most out of any of the characters in the show, but the sparks of everything that makes her good never fade, and if anything, they're strengthened by the end, going well beyond the time skip as well. Even if she drifted apart from the people she was so dependent on, she still looks happy. I don't think there's a single frame from the time skip where she isn't smiling. It's a character I feel like I can project a lot of myself onto, and that makes me feel extremely optimistic about attributes of myself I'm still battling to not feel extremely insecure about. Also, she's just like so fucking cute. Like, holy shit, look at that face. I don't care. Scratch anything I said about her being flawed just now. That thing cannot do wrong. Marcy Wu has, without a doubt, touched the lives of many, and will forever live on as one of the most lovable little dorks in all of fiction. And yes, she's probably my favorite character as well, because of course she is. Sorry, I'm not unique. A character I feel isn't appreciated nearly as much considering his importance to the story is Sprig. I think Anne's friendship with Sasha and Marcy tends to overshadow hers with Sprig when it comes to the fandom, mostly due to the fact that those relationships were more complicated and required a lot more work to develop. Sprig, however, was a true friend since the very beginning, and while his development isn't quite as complex and deep as that of others, he is the main supporting protagonist for a reason. When Anne is first brought to Amphibia, she needs a real friend to show her how friendship really should be. Sprig is that friend. He is all the things that a friend should be, all while having his own traits and story. He's the first to see the good in Anne, and does typically try to see the good in people, although he certainly is much harder to forgive than Anne is. Sprig's most important trait really is that he's just endlessly entertaining. entertaining, and of course adorable. I really enjoy and resonate with the decision to have Justin Felbinger, an actual child, voice Sprig rather than an adult comedian like a lot of shows do, because it better encapsulates the innocence and naivety shown by him throughout the show, something that is crucial to his character. The emotional scenes with Sprig hit exponentially harder due to this immaturity, as it really hammers in the fact that this is a child, a 10-year-old who has faced multiple near-death experiences and lost his parents before he could even form any coherent thoughts. When Anne starts to let go of the negative traits she had obtained from Sasha, she actively adopts positive traits from Sprig, being inspired by his bravery and decision to stand up for her time and time again. Sprig is consistently a good influence, and whenever he's not, it's clearly coming from a place of childhood immaturity that is understandable and doesn't take away from his character. And hey, how can you not love Sprivy? They're adorable, and I wish them all the happiness in the entire world. While I believe Sprig to be my personal favorite from the Planter family, I don't think that makes the other two members any weaker. Yes, Polly is also a character that doesn't tend to get deep character moments, but she's also the most consistent of the Planters to me. Every episode that revolves around her or every scene that she's prevalent in is typically really enjoyable. I think the young but violent trope can be a tad bit overused at times, but her delivery and writing is so sharp and witty, I can never complain. I feel like I've spoken on Hop Pop as much as I probably could at this point, and I don't want to milk this poor old man for all he's worth, but again, I appreciate how many mistakes he's made and how he consistently works to make up for it. He's such a caring and lovable character, and is a part of what makes the Planters such a strong supporter for the show. He's also my dad's favorite character. Hi, Dad. Though of course the Planters and Anne's relationship is the most important, as they are the central focus of the show itself, the other two girls' found families and Amphibia are just as strong, even if not showcased as much. Grime makes an exceptional companion to Sasha, sure, but he's just as much a delight on his own. Again, most of the development of Amphibia's characters is given to the Calamity Trio, so we don't necessarily get to see incredibly deep or impactful moments of depth and change within the supporting cast. Grime, however, undergoes his own arc throughout the events of Amphibia. While the Planters are the ones to bring positive change into Anne's life, Sasha actually helps kickstart Grime's own character growth and development, at first teaching him how to charm his enemy and then helping him get back up on his feet once all had seemed lost. Even if it was initially through bad intentions, Grime forges his first real friendship in Sasha, culminating in him eventually taking a hit to protect her, losing his arm in the process. While the entire cast is entertaining, Grime absolutely steals the show in any episode he's featured in, either because he's the funniest or because he's just being the most threatening. He's a perfect character to embody the Toads, brutish and war-hungry at first, sure, but not without a strong sense of morality, courage, and strength. Percy and Braddock, while not as important as Grime, also represent his and Sasha's growth throughout the series, and I highly appreciate the decision to not bring them back for the finale to directly witness Sasha and Grime's growth. Again, even if it's implied they catch wind of their heroism, it's a complete possibility that they don't. And former friends not being present to witness change and growth is something I can relate to pretty heavily. It's an important story to tell. Marcy's companions of Olivia, Yunan, and Andreas are also all phenomenal characters with their own respective strengths. While Olivia and Yunan may not have been able to form a proper bond with Marcy, they are still some of the show's most memorable characters, primarily through their dynamic with each other. A perfect example of opposites attracting. Andreas Leviathan and his relationship with Marcy, on the other hand, is much more crucial to the actual story, making it even more important that it's done right. Andreas is the main antagonist of Amphibia. His characterization is insanely significant, and if it was butchered, it would affect the show as a whole. Thankfully, I think he was done as well as he possibly could have been. Again, I do wish that The Core and the King was a longer episode. I think his relationship with Leaf and Beryl would have benefited from more screen time, but the fact that so much is able to be accomplished in that short amount of a time is nothing short of impressive. Andreas is an archetype far from unseen. A good parallel to his character would probably be Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender, and in some cases Hunter from the Owl House. Ironic considering young Andreas shares this voice actor. Andreas is a fallen prince, his life dedicated to serving his ancestors and more specifically his father. Despite his descent into tyranny, Andreas had always had a moral compass hidden beneath his royally corrupt exterior. When his father questions Leaf's loyalty, he immediately makes excuses for her, even when he doesn't necessarily agree with Leaf's point of view. He still tries to actively protect her from his father's wrath, and only starts to feel antagonistic towards her after her betrayal. And yes, Leaf did undoubtedly still betray Andreas, even if it was objectively for the greater good. The fact that the situation isn't entirely black and white showcases that Andreas was given reason to be upset. He was betrayed by his closest friend, and he was never reached out to her again, aside from a letter written years into the future that he wasn't even able to see until centuries later. Andreas doesn't completely lose his moral compass nor his love for his friends after his corruption, however. We know this because of his decision to explicitly bide time for Marcy and her friends, once again rationalizing to his father and the Core why Marcy shouldn't be disposed of. While this time around he portrays it as being a part of his grander plan, it still comes from doubt and a genuine care for Marcy. His line of "she's only a child" at the Core's suggestion of murdering her makes my heart ache every time. time. His father's manipulation and expectations of him had been so persistent, so extreme, that he had been pressured into killing a literal child, and then allowing a hive mind to take control of her body. The way Andreas acts around the core is extremely telling. We always see him as this larger-than-life imposing threat, but here he's on a leash. He submits to the core, he is actively afraid of it and how it perceives him, and he is constantly being spat at by Darcy for still not being good enough. Only when he laments that he had thought of nothing else but conquering Earth for 1,000 years does Aldrich finally address him as his son, stating he thinks he's finally becoming proud of him. Of course, a lot of the strength of Andreas' character is derived from the character of Darcy or the core, and oh boy, do I have a lot to say about the core. The core, or Darcy, is one of my favorite villains in anything ever. Not only am I a sucker for the they-them pronouns because we are literally multiple people trope they've got going on, but when you combine such an evil and frightening concept with the quirkiness of one of fiction's most lovable characters of all time, you get one of the most criminally underutilized characters since fucking Vanny Security Breach. Of course, the core is, hang on, I just got a letter. Our apologies, but you lack the proper documentation to commentate on the character of neither the core nor Darcy Wu. Please contact your local autistic eldritch horror if you wish to speak more on this matter. Thank you? What? Lack the proper documentation. I've dedicated weeks straight to this video's creation. I've seen the series maybe 5 times in the past month. I've lost sleep over how much I love this thing. Who could possibly come even close to having the qualifications to speak on this other than me?
Oh, Darcy. Oh my god, Darcy. I adore this character more than anyone else in this show because to me, they are the perfect antithesis to the show's entire theme. Amphibia is a show all about change. It's a story about growing up, about accepting that things won't always be the way they are, and that's okay. And we see this theme explored wonderfully throughout the entire show, what with each of the main characters coping in their own ways, the focus on frogs and toads, animals that literally go through the most drastic changes in all of nature, and of course, Darcy. See, when talking about this villain and what she represents to the story, there is one very quick thing that needs to be brought up. Darcy, despite what her name would have you believe, is not simply an evil, dark Marcy or whatever. This character is supposed to be a host vessel for the core, with Marcy's body being puppeted around by what is essentially one giant mass of old dudes who used to rule the entire kingdom of Amphibia. And this conceptually is like so genius to me because like I said, this perfectly embodies the opposite of what this show was all about. This entire show happened because Marcy, scared of experiencing drastic change in her life in the real world, brought both of her friends to Amphibia. She refuses to go home, refuses to let her friends leave, so much so that she willingly worked with King Andreas so they would stay. Then we look over at the core, and this thing embodies something very similar. This being, an amalgam of old rulers, refuses to allow its kingdom to change in any meaningful way. It maintains a cruel and unjust status quo, which it enforces with an iron fist, constantly building upon itself and becoming stronger so that nobody can bring about change. When this thing takes over Marcy, creating Darcy, we are essentially seeing the two driving forces in this show that stand against change becoming one. And that is just... That is so cool, like, oh my god. And the cool thing about this too is that despite it being the core controlling Marcy's body, it isn't really like one character is completely erased in favor of the other. This union between both the core and Marcy creates someone entirely new as the core begins to inherit traits from Marcy's own memories. I mean, even the name Darcy exists because they pulled it from Marcy's mind. It's the evil corruption of the core and what it stands for mixed with the whimsy and goofy personality of Marcy, and what this essentially creates is a super interesting villain that can be really menacing, who is also just so unserious, I'm gonna be real. Like, on one hand, we see the unification of the core and Marcy makes this villain incredibly imposing. She knows how to get under every character's skin, whether it be Anne and Sasha by pulling from Marcy's memories, or even King Andreas, who she toys with by using the voice of his father. This character knows how to manipulate and take take emotional hold of whoever she talks to, and it makes her feel incredibly intimidating. But then on the other hand, her being this weird eldritch horror puppeting around a Dungeons and Dragons obsessed teenager just makes her so incredibly goofy sometimes. Like, all the shit I just described could be happening. She could be saying the spookiest, most emotionally charged stuff, and then right after she's walking around like a Gary's Mod ragdoll and stuffing her face with cupcakes.
That girls with an eyebrow slit can't have a ube cupcake.
And I absolutely love that because this character doesn't feel like she always has to be super evil and conniving to be fun to watch. It makes the serious moments stand out way more when they do happen. This character is insanely cool to me and stood out as probably my favorite part of the show when she appeared. She's so incredibly captivating and felt like the culmination of the entire conflict to eventually come into one being. Which is why I will say though, that despite how awesome she is, if I were to complain about one thing, it's that we should have gotten more of her, man. Like, every time she is on screen is awesome, but I feel like we don't get to actually spend much time with her before the core and Marcy get separated. And like, don't get me wrong, the climax of the show is crazy. The core literally becomes the fucking moon. But I don't know, with how well fleshed out this character was when she was introduced, it feels like she's over and done with way too fast. I get that she was introduced in the final season. That is a death sentence for a lot of characters being like fully fleshed out. But I feel like there are a lot of really cool traits that just get used for one or two bits that could have been even further explored. Like, considering the fact that the core kind of exemplifies all of Marcy's worst traits and how it is actively in control of her, I feel like that could have been fleshed out a lot more. Maybe more of Marcy could begin to shine through and begin to resist the core. Maybe more of her traits could manifest in Darcy and cause her to weaken. I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, but I just see so much potential in this character, and I feel like she kind of just got relegated to final boss status without much else going on after her initial introduction. That being said though, I still adore this villain and remember her incredibly fondly years after finishing the show. Her design is great, she fits the entire show's theme to a T, she's a blast to watch, she's basically everything I look for in an animated villain.
Wow, okay. Pretty rude of them to interrupt me, huh? Oh, I can't stay mad at a face like that. Huge thanks to Pastra for coming on to talk about this fucking creature. You are my best friend in the whole wide world. There really isn't much more I can speak of in regards to Darcy, although I will add that a personal favorite trait of theirs to me is specifically their innate hunger and lust for devouring. Because of how unfortunately underutilized this character is, she kinda only has a few memorable scenes, and funnily enough, one of their most defining scenes is simply just eating red velvet cupcakes with ube frosting. This is a trait she inherited from Marcy, sure, but actually comes from the fact that the core hadn't had a body in thousands of years. Originally, Darcy was supposed to be obsessed with eating, specifically eating apples. I mention this because I just really fucking love this trope, and it also recontextualizes their funny cupcake scene, playing into Darcy's obsession with being alive and extreme fear of death or mortality. Anyways, yeah, I love Darcy, and I think we as a community need to work together better to stop mischaracterizing them so much. Looking at you, Disney. As much as I love Chibi vs. Darcy, she would not fucking do that. Amphibia, aside from its characters, absolutely excels at creating a captivating world with rich environments and mysteries still yet to unfold. Yes, it's time to talk about the world building of Amphibia. More specifically, as my dear Marcy would put it, the political nuances of Amphibia's species-based caste system. Honestly, I never saw myself as someone who would take an interest in politics, fictional or not, but the fictional politics of Amphibia have been incredibly interesting to research and learn more about. It is blatantly obvious throughout the show that the frogs, toads, and newts are all on different strands of the social hierarchy, something I touched on before. The three races had been primarily segregated for what we can assume to be 1,000 years. Seeing as Andreas is so impacted by Leaf's betrayal, he not only develops a trauma-based tyrannical personality, but also discovers racism, as you do, directly stating that Leaf and her kind need to be dealt with before reassigning Beryl to the outskirts of towns. While there did seem to be more integration between the races prior to this encounter, Andreas is absolutely not the one responsible for the caste system of Amphibia. Even when they were all still on good terms, Beryl the Toad is still a military force to protect the monarchy, and Leaf the Frog is still someone who tends to the gardens belonging to the royal family of newts. Aldrich also especially does not appreciate Andreas' friendship with them, and while most of that comes from his manipulative tendencies and will to isolate Andreas, there's definitely some classist aspects to it as well. Amphibia did witness a golden age of peace when Valeriana used the Calamity Gems to create the Calamity Box, unifying the three races. This period of peace, however, came at the price of the box being used to conquer other worlds and leave them devoid of life and resources. But again, the period of peace didn't entirely unify the three races. There still appeared to be specific expectations and roles for each race. Amphibia is of course run under a hereditary monarchy, with the monarch of the Leviathan family being the sole leader of all of Amphibia. However, there still appears to be smaller branches of government shown through the existence of mayors, elected through representative democracy. Despite the ability to elect anyone as a representative, toads are stated to practically always be the ones winning the elections, as they're practically assigned to these smaller frog towns to keep them in line, again likely as a result of Andreas' influence. The frogs are the lowest class citizens of Amphibia, not counting nonverbal or unintelligent creatures. They are humble farm folk who we can assume are often extorted for their produce, alluded to by Grime. Frogs are also required to pay taxes, boo, taxes that are collected by the Toad Army, who is backed by the Utopian military. Let's make a little hierarchy pyramid to visualize Amphibia's caste system. At the bottom we have the quote-unquote unintelligent species. These can range from anything to farm animals like snails, to spiders who appear to be kept as house pets, to hostile creatures like kilomoths. These are the amphibian equivalent to animals. Right above them we have the frogs, the farmer population of Amphibia. They are artisans and merchants, however they aren't necessarily comparable with peasants or serfs, as some frog families are shown to be extraordinarily wealthy, meaning it is more than possible for a frog to find success. The rich frogs still fit into a merchant class, however, as the Ribiton estate is a power built on manufacturing and selling goods rather than royalty. While frogs are allowed to find financial power, it is clear that they should not be allowed nor encouraged to seek political power, as when Hop Pop unknowingly inspires frogs to rebel against the toads, he is met with plans of execution. Speaking of the toads, they're right above the frogs on our triangle. They are the middle military class, most comparable to knights and soldiers. The toads are directly supported by and funded by the Utopian military and government, and are tasked with controlling the frogs. Failure to comply with this task results in not only banishment from the Toad Army, but presumably death, as Yunnan is shown to actively hunt down Grime to attack him after his banishment. Above the toads is the newts, the most sophisticated society. They primarily live in the capital, and the monarchy consists of giant fucking newts. Somewhere off to the side would be the Olms, as they're an isolationist society kind of separated from the other amphibians. We can assume they are seen as lesser than the newts, however, as their land is extorted for resources after Andreas' hostile takeover. Interestingly enough, Andreas' takedown seems to have abolished the hereditary monarchy, as by the end of the show, it's implied that Amphibia is not ruled by a single monarch, but rather the collaborative efforts of Olivia, Yunnan, and Grime. Again, can't wait for that spin-off comic because I am so desperate to know the current state of Amphibia's government. Plus, because Strange Voyage is presumably taking place in a new continent of Amphibia, and because it's in comic format, they can get away with more, us Amphibia world-building dick writers will be served the 5-course meal we've been craving for years. Hooray! Speaking of Strange Voyage, I cannot stress enough how much hope I have for this project considering Beatrice Bovo, otherwise known as Zio, is behind the illustration work. Bringing on prominent fandom figures who have proven themselves to be more than passionate about the franchises they love for a project such as this is perfect, and I wish more franchises would do this instead of just getting random people. Except for FNAF, I think that's the only exception. This leads me into my next topic, however, and my personal favorite thing to talk about, the importance of fandom culture, in this case specifically surrounding Amphibia. I've been in the Amphibia fandom since maybe around 2020, and although somewhere along the line I dropped out of it due to my blossoming hatred for social media, I never stopped looking at the community from afar, admiring the creativity and dedication of its members. And as such, I wanted to try a little social experiment out, just to see how much dedication still remains within this community. Behold, my evil alter ego! Okay, yeah, so basically I made an account to post my Amphibia art just to see how it would go. That's it. It's not as interesting as it sounds. But I'll be damned, I was not expecting my shitty doodles to average thousands of likes and see support from people like Matt Bradley himself. I've quickly come to learn that this fan base is very tightly knit. It's one of those communities where everyone kind of knows each other, and most people have been there since the beginning. But it's also not unwelcoming in the slightest. Seriously, people have been so damn nice to me for no reason. I guess the only fandoms that aren't literally the worst places on the entire planet are ones that are starved for content and are made up of a handful of very dedicated community members. When the Amphibia fandom, or more so Alphibia because the two were kinda conjoined, was at its height, however, it was as eventful as you would expect. Lots of catfights, Amphibia crew members at best being really fucking weird and at worst creating and supporting gross content, coping to an absurd degree during hiatuses. I don't know, man. It was a time to be alive. But for every weirdo and upsetting content created against seemingly everyone's will, you'd get a Marky Woo, or Wormphibia, or Andreas Gallon size. And suddenly, it was all worth it. Also, at one point, Tommy in it reacted to a clip of Marcy falling down the stairs and people got mad at it. Like, am I the only one who remembers this? I think about this all the time. Reminiscing about a fandom like Amphibia's, or the L Houses, or even Gravity Falls, although my brain was too small to remember that time period super well, makes me really mourn the gradual death of weekly airing television. Anyone who's ever been a part of a fandom for something that everyone can watch live at the same time knows what I'm talking about. This shit is a bonding experience. You haven't lived until you've live tweeted some crazy TV show twist. I really only get to do this anymore with South Park, and even that is slowly declining in favor of streaming specials. I pray to God the new season is more than like 5 episodes, by the way. Holy shit, that killed me. You wanna know what my favorite part of a community is, though? When everyone collectively bands together to make fun of one person in particular. I want to introduce you to a dear friend of mine. He doesn't know I exist, but little does he know, he's done more for me and my friend group than any of us have ever done for each other. Say hello to Admiral DT8, better known as Daryl, Amphibia's one and only lolcow. Okay, I'm sure there are more, but this guy is the most infamous. I think it'd take years to go over literally everything this guy has done, but it's important to know he's written literally hundreds of thousands of words of Amphibia fanfiction in which his self-insert dates Anne, and he'll tell you this isn't his self-insert because he recently changed the character's name from Daryl to Dylan, but like, dude, come on. Grown adult, by the way. I know I don't have to mention this guy's existence, but I had to. It's so fucking funny to me that literally every single person in this fandom probably knows who this guy is. If this video does well, I'll stream me and my friends reading some of this guy's fanfiction. It's so important. Okay guys, let's play a fun game. Tag yourself as Daryl Art. Are you more of a nativity scene kind of person, or the miracle of childbirth? What's even going on here? Fandom is the most important part of something you create. If you reject and dislike the fans of something you create, I'd argue you don't really enjoy the full creation process. Matt Bradley is such a loving creator. He engages with people who love his work without feeding into an aspect of parasociality. Is that a word? And is very accepting of fan-created works and merchandise. Oh yeah, if you've made it this far into the video, congratulations, by the way. Use code QUINFIBIA for free domestic shipping on my keychains. Of course, Matt was also very understanding of probably one of the most important aspects of any fan-based space, shipping. Shipping is more often than not a very double-edged sword. On one end, it's incredibly important to fandom culture and has been rooted very deeply into my soul since I was but a small quinling, but it can also become incredibly annoying or even inspire harassment in some cases. I understand being weirded out by some ships, and I definitely understand disliking ships that are illegal or disturbing in nature, but one of the most important things to remember about the internet is if you see something you don't like, you don't have to waste hours of your day arguing with someone about it. In Amphibia's case, shipping is a pretty integral part of its fandom. This is something pretty typical in cartoon fan spaces, as a lot of cartoons feature prominent romances. And of course, cartoons are incredibly important to people growing up queer. Amphibia does have a few confirmed couples, the most prominent probably being Sprig and Ivy, Percy and Braddock, Olivia and Yunnan, Hop Pop and Sylvia, Jess and Allie, and Anne's parents. Toadstool and Toadie are also implied to be in love by a tweet from Matt. I'll talk more about the importance of Amphibia's queerness in a moment, but I especially want to highlight the most popular ship in the entire fandom first. Actually, hang on, let me check with my Dark Overlord first, I'll be right back. Guys, I'm so happy right now. In the spirit of Pride Month, I've been given permission to talk about Sasha and Darcy. I need a minute to think about this. Seriously though, Sasha and Darcy, or Sasha x Marcy, is probably one of my most treasured ships of all time. It's even earned a spot of fame in my Discord bio. Only one other ship has that privilege. Can you guess what it is? I will admit, it did take a little bit for this ship to grow on me at first. I was initially more drawn towards Marsan, as most people at the time were, but I was uneducated. Once someone's heart is blessed with toxic Yuri, there's no going back to the world they knew before. I feel like it isn't spoken about enough, but Sasha and Darcy, despite being completely fanon and not canon within the contents of the show, is a perfect example of how Amphibia has some of the best representation in a children's cartoon. Sasha and Darcy, at least according to 2024 AO3 stats, is the most popular polyamorous ship that isn't primarily for the purpose of sexualization. In fact, looking more at this list reveals that polyamorous ships are composed mostly of all men for the purpose of fetishization. I mentioned it a bit in my boyfriend's video, but polyamorous romance is one of the rarest kinds of representation that can be seen in media. When it's done, it's typically the entire point of the relationship. The characters hardly have chemistry beyond being poly. Other polyamorous relationships or characters are typically confirmed off-screen or by a creator on social media, so actual representation of polyamory is very scarce. I've asked around the community, and it seems that Sasha and Darcy is a lot of people's first ever introduction to poly shipping. Despite it not being canon, it's so beloved within the community that Disney themselves seems to feature them prominently in pride posts or typically romantic settings, when Olivia is right there. Matt is also very mature with the way he handles this ship, explaining that he understands shipping characters as one of the most appreciative things a fan can do, and that these characters were specifically never put in romantic situations because he understands the importance of headcanons and the power they hold. He even supposedly has a favorite variation of the ship, but he won't say who. Damn it, Matt. I feel something that's really important to me specifically when talking about this ship is the fact that it works better not being canon. I feel like making these characters have a romantic endgame actively takes away from the story and the themes Amphibia is trying to portray. I know a lot of my favorite ships I actually prefer not being canon. Sasha and Darcy is important because it belongs to the fandom. It speaks to the importance of headcanons and shipping culture, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I say that, but I don't know, if there was like any kind of like semi-canon interaction between any of them, I'm not... I'd lose my shit, dude. Amphibia in general is also just an amazing example of representation within media in general. I feel it often gets overshadowed by the Owl House because almost every character in that show is queer, it seems, but to some degree, I think Amphibia's more subtle approach can often be more effective than media that outwardly displays its queerness on every little thing. I myself am probably the woke final boss when it comes to YouTubers. A disabled, openly queer, transgender, indigenous Mexican American, I know how much representation in media matters, especially considering I knew I was queer from a very young age. Amphibia's representation is very natural. It doesn't feel hand-fisted or done for brownie points. The representation is praised for celebrating and normalizing queerness. Again, Olivia and Yunnan enter a relationship by the end of the series, 2 characters introduced in season 3 are sapphic and confirmed to be dating, and of course, Sasha was confirmed to be bisexual in the series finale, something that I actually fucking screamed at. Saying this confirmation was huge to the fandom would kind of be an understatement. Also, it makes her having some kind of toxic crush on Anne plausible, so live, laugh, love my captured ore comparisons. Where I feel the representation of Amphibia truly shines is when it comes to the importance of culture and Thai representation. I'm fortunate enough to have grown up seeing my own culture represented pretty often. Hell, Camila and Luz from the Owl House are a spitting fucking image of me and my mom. Amphibia, meanwhile, is the first animated show to feature a Thai-American lead in Anne, something that was incredibly important to Matt as a Thai-American himself. Brenda Song, Anne's voice actress, is also half Thai herself. Matt explained that growing up, he didn't really see any kind of Southeast Asian representation on screen. In his words, I remember as a kid desperately seeking it out. I would watch these 90s Mortal Kombat films a lot because it was filmed in Ayutthaya, Thailand, just because there was some ruins that looked cool for that sort of movie. I would also watch The King and I was very desperate to connect to my heritage because my mother would be like, "Oh, you're Thai," and I'd be like, "What does that mean?" And she'd be like, "Well, you know, I can't explain." For me as a creator, having this Thai character was almost a #1 priority for me so that other kids like me growing up could look at the TV screen and be like, "Hey, it's me," or "Hey, I'm there too." I think something this specific was only going to be done by someone who had Thai background. Anne's heritage and culture isn't just something that's mentioned a few times, it's an active part of her character throughout the first 2 seasons, and something we see on full display in the 3rd season, when her family is introduced. Anne's parents are incredibly important to her character and culture. Her mother is actually voiced by Matt's very own mother, as he wanted someone who could fluently speak Thai to portray the character. The fact that she's voiced by Matt's mother shows how important these characters are and how close to his heart his culture is. In fact, Amphibia's entire premise was inspired by Matt's visits to Bangkok with his mother. Matt states, "Amphibia was inspired by my memories as a child of traveling to Bangkok every summer to visit my mother's side of the family. At the beginning of each visit, I would be immediately overwhelmed by how different Thailand was compared to California, but by the end of the trip, I never wanted to leave. In creating Amphibia, I wanted to bottle up that magical feeling. Anne will arrive feeling one way, but the world begins to grow on her over the course of the series." Season 3's cultural importance spreads beyond just Anne's parents. There's an entire episode that takes place at a Thai temple, in which the local Thai community demonstrates their closeness by rallying with Anne to beat the shit out of Andreas' robot. It's entertaining, sure, but it also speaks to the closeness of those immigrant communities. Anne's parents are also immigrants themselves, as stated by Matt, which is why their accents are much more apparent than Anne's. Marcy's parents, meanwhile, aren't depicted with accents in their only speaking appearance, in order to clarify that they're 2nd or 3rd generation Taiwanese immigrants. It's really something special to know how much you can imply about a character culturally without even outright saying anything, and it really shows how much this representation matters to the people behind the show's creation. Hell, even Anne's alienation in Worldwood could be interpreted as a representation of xenophobia, something Matt stated she didn't necessarily consider her parents felt before. Even Sasha being white can be interpreted as an ethnic dynamic when her authority over Anne and Marcy is considered, seeing as Matt stated the friend dynamic is meant to mirror the ethnic dynamic of his own friend group growing up. There is a wonderfully plentiful amount of cultural references within the world building of Amphibia itself as well. Another reason why it's super strong to me in particular. Bizarre Bazaar's art direction and environments are intended to mimic Asian night markets, and Lost in Utopia is not so subtly meant to parallel the feeling of being a tourist in a foreign country. It will never not be inspiring to me how important cultural representation is to Matt, and it's amazing to know that a new generation of kids can consistently see themselves on screen now because of creators who truthfully care about their audiences and the representation that they give them. I cannot tell you how excited I am for the Thai fantasy film that Matt and Rebecca Sugar are working on over at Sony Pictures Animation. Please, for the love of God, be a Spider-Verse or a Mitchells vs. the Machines and not a Hotel Transylvania 4 or Emoji Movie.
Someone genuinely, unironically went into a room and pitched the Emoji Movie.
Amphibia's representation isn't so great simply because of its explicit depiction of different cultures and queer people, but because it also flourishes through unintentional representation of a group that is infamous for never having good intentional representation in media whatsoever. Okay, yeah. It's finally time to talk about Marcy Wu's neurodivergence. Before I start, I just want to say that I am diagnosed with autism. I'm on the autism spectrum disorder, and I don't mean to describe myself as autistic because it's a sillier way of calling myself quirky. I have a medical diagnosis, and a topic such as this one is something that means a lot to me as a kid who grew up exhibiting a lot of Marcy's behaviors. Everyone experiences ASD differently, my experiences may be different to yours, and that's completely okay. Okay, ramble time. Autistic representation is by far one of the rarest forms of representation seen throughout media, and when it's done explicitly or when a character is created for the sole purpose of being autistic, there is a 99 out of 100 chance that that character will fucking suck, and will not reach nor relate to its intended audience whatsoever. Media like The Good Doctor, Atypical, and whatever the hell was going on with that shitty movie Sia made about autism are prime examples as to why people really don't enjoy representation like this. Media that tries to portray the gritty, harsh reality of living with autism doesn't really make an effort to actually portray the struggle of being autistic. Instead, it puts an emphasis on those around an autistic character, and the attempt at representation devolves into the oh-so-tragic struggles of being forced to know an autistic person. I think the most common example of this is media that surrounds a parent with an autistic child because it's usually made for parents of autistic children, just so they can go, yep, it sure is hell having an autistic child. Sure, maybe it is relatable to a lot of these parents, but personally, I don't like having something be directly marketed as a representation meant for me, only to sit down, watch it, and be told to my face that I make my parents' lives miserable. Truthfully, I think the strongest form of autistic representation is when a character isn't even created with the intention or purpose of being autistic, but ends up genuinely resonating with actual people who have ASD. These characters are essentially claimed rather than created for brownie points, or to sell representation to an audience. And truthfully, you could say that about any character that exhibits behaviors the fandom may take as representing a certain thing. Any character based around the archetype of being nerdy or socially inept but smart is bound to get the stamp of ASD headcanoning sealed on them forever. I know characters like Reagan Ridley, Benny, Peridot, Donatello, and fucking Will Graham are pretty popular examples of autism headcanoning. In most cases, it's because a character displays one or two traits that are commonly associated with ASD, typically a quirkiness or social ineptitude that many people on the spectrum relate to heavily. But Marcy specifically exhibits multiple behaviors that can be attributed to symptoms of autism. For one, she frequently makes excitable or nervous movements with her hands in a way that other characters don't, except for Sprig, who has ADHD, and consistently does the autistic T-Rex arm thing. She experiences life through constantly journaling things as they happen, and also has a tendency to hyper-focus on a task or hobby so intensely that she becomes completely engulfed in it, oblivious to the world around her. She writes in her journal about disliking certain textures, and again, there was an entire episode about how she's incredibly smart but doesn't find herself to be good at socializing, and to prove her point, she directly mentions that she struggles with eye contact specifically. Because of these obvious implications, a lot of autistic people, myself included, resonated strongly with Marcy's character, and Matt Riley was very frequently flooded with questions asking if Marcy was intended to be autistic. When asked in an AMA, Matt gave a pretty straightforward response. She was not written with that intention, but I think we get to know our characters better as we write them. In many ways, they tell us who they are, not vice versa. I am so happy to see people identify with her in this way. Before the release of Marcy's journal, Matt was interviewed and once again was asked about Marcy's autism. Though he didn't see himself as qualified to properly confirm this character as autistic, a group of psychiatrists analyzed Marcy's character and claimed that she was very likely to fall under the autism spectrum, and Matt claimed he couldn't really argue with that. Thus began the most eventful 12 or so hours of this fandom's entire lifespan. Not only was Marcy practically finally confirmed to be autistic, but she was done so in probably the funniest way possible. She was literally diagnosed by medical professionals. So many fans of Amphibia immediately rejoiced, myself included. This character meant so much to so many people. This was a huge deal. It sparked a fandom-wide celebration, until the Dark Ages began. Marcy is a very complicated character who goes through a lot of traumatic experiences throughout the show. Some people, for whatever reason, believed that the decision to make her autistic would be straight up ableist because of the pain she endured. People were so furious about this, Matt had to make a thread once again stating that on the topic of Marcy's autism, you're allowed to think whatever you'd like, but his words had been misinterpreted. We essentially lost what could have been some really relatable canon autistic representation because people on Twitter were calling the writers ableist just because an autistic character felt pain. This is probably one of the most appalling cases of overcorrection I have ever seen. In an effort to be more accepting and politically correct, people were actively contributing to the infantilization of autistic people, going as far to claim that Darcy was an ableist concept as well, specifically citing the scene in which Marcy is strapped to a chair in order to be possessed, comparing it to literal shock therapy. I can kind of understand where the specific concern comes from, as the scene would be pretty unfortunate with that context, but it is very clear that that was not and never will be the intention with this scene. Marcy was not initially written with being autistic in mind, and this scene is pretty obviously trying to reference an electric chair. Amphibia is a dark show, it has dark themes, and this is a dark scene. To actively shield a character from being treated like any other character simply because of their neurodivergence is to completely discredit their autonomy. Sasha is bisexual, but you don't see the people calling the writers homophobic because she tries to kill herself or gets her back split open. You wouldn't call the creators racist for literally fucking killing Anne. Autistic people can still experience batshit crazy shit too. And yes, people still make the argument that Marcy's story is ableist to this day. What on earth happened to media literacy? This video is literally the love child of a team of autistic individuals. We've all had plenty of our own bad experiences, and we all relate pretty heavily to Marcy and find comfort and enjoyment in her character. This is a topic that means so much to so many people, yet an ungrateful community managed to rip it away through its own overcorrection. Congratulations, Amphibia fandom. You somehow managed to professionally diagnose a character as autistic and then get her diagnosis literally revoked. That's actually kind of impressive. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that happen before. Oh well, at least we still have Sprig. Oh god, Sprig, no, what happened? Overall, I think people tend to forget just how much representation matters, especially in media that is typically directed more towards children. I know shows like Steven Universe were especially empowering to me when they first aired because at that point in my life, I had yet to see anyone like me in the shows that I'd watched, and I especially never saw it be normalized and celebrated as a part of life. Wow, it's so nice to see progression within cartoons, especially from such a publicly supportive and progressive company like Disney. Yep. No problem with them at all. Oh wait, no, I hate Disney, and they suck. Yeah, sorry. I was thinking about a different Disney. Sorry about that. Oh, Disney, the grip you have had over me is nothing short of impressive. Growing up with Disney Channel and Disney movies is a kind of magic that is universal. There's a reason their marketing plays so heavily into nostalgia and the idea of this movie magic. They have undoubtedly created some of the greatest forces in animation to this date, and deserve credit where credit is due. Disney, however, has always had and always will love money so much more than it loves its audiences, and sees absolutely no issue censoring black people in posters for China. Thanks, Disney. A lot of diversity is unfortunately pushed super far into the end of a show's runtime, because the more last minute a decision like this is, the less likely their show is to become cancelled or shortened. Sometimes creatives even have to actively lie to the producers, like in the case of Alex Hirsch, where during Gravity Falls' runtime, he told S&P time and time again that two very obviously gay characters were just buddies, when they were in fact not, and he was duping them the entire time. God, I love that man. The reason that Disney in particular is scrutinized so much for their horrible handling of their queer properties is because they are the most outwardly capitalistic about it. In private, they are known to censor and cut like trigger-happy maniacs, but whenever Pride Month rolls around, suddenly it's time for their Pride collections and Pride merch and oh wow, we love gay people so much. Obviously, the first thing everyone thinks about when this conversation is brought up is the Owl House. Dana Terrace had to fight tooth and nail to include the explicitly queer elements of the show, and when Disney finally budged on their decision and all was fine, the show was cancelled, its final season being reduced to 3 specials, and the reason they gave was simply that it didn't fit their branding or whatever the fuck. Dana prefaced that this wasn't specifically because of the queer nature of the show, although, come on, it's definitely a big factor considering how dark Disney has been able to get in the past with things. Right, dark, that's what I'm supposed to be talking about, okay. Amphibia is amazing. I love it so much, but holy shit if it wasn't actively held back by Disney's stupidity at times. I mentioned earlier that True Colors was delayed, and while that was a whole fiasco, the reason it was in particular an insane time for the fandom was because Disney demanded changes in the episode only 2 days before its initial release, then delayed it the very night of its planned air date, and forgot to not release it on iTunes, and so the entire episode was leaked prior to its release. Already unfortunate mishandling, especially considering how important this episode is to the story and to the creatives behind it, but once again, Disney actively sacrificed Amphibia's story being as impactful as it could have been because of True Colors. Again, Marcy's cliffhanger was immediately followed up on as a compromise in order to show the episode in its original entire state. And Disney was not happy about the darker shift. Season 3A's total whiplash is primarily the way it is probably because of Disney. They were watching Amphibia Amphibia like a goddamn hawk. Those evil bitches robbed me of my Andreas cyborg skeleton. I'm shaking them up and down. I'm so angry. I understand that maybe I'm asking too much of a kid's show, sure, but kids aren't as stupid as Disney thinks they are. Like, why don't we take a look at some of the scenes from other cartoons that are universally beloved? Okay, well, damn, it's actually kind of crazy how much they let slide throughout Gumball. Oh yeah, there's Avatar: The Last Airbender. Wow, that show is pretty crazy, and also didn't treat its audience like they were 5 years old. It's almost like it still has an absurd amount of relevance in today's pop culture. Or to put it in a language Disney might understand, it still makes money. Oh, okay, well what about literally half of the shit that happens in Infinity Train? That was pretty dark. Oh wait, sorry, I forgot that doesn't exist. It doesn't count because HBO and Cartoon Network refuse to acknowledge that it exists. Sorry, probably not a good example. God, I am so mad about that though. Holy shit, I could make a whole different video all about that. Don't even get me started. Okay, what about, Adventure Time? That show had it all. Gay people, dark moments, the whole package, and is still one of the most beloved cartoons of all time. And again, it's still thriving monetarily. Look, they're in Fortnite. They're in Fortnite. Now that I think about it, Cartoon Network's lineup in general at that time is probably a good example of what to do in terms of balancing humor and darker themes. Huh. I don't like Disney at all, and I think they're really stupid. They are lazy and evil and desperate, and good God, I am begging them to make a movie that doesn't make me want to rip my eyes out. Holy shit, I hated that Lilo and Stitch remake. The only reason my ass was dragged to it is because I'm still on side watch after I cried too hard looking at pictures of Marcy Wu. I'm sorry, I get passionate. I know it can often be disheartening to see corporations handling their properties and fans in such a tone, but there is always hope for the future, I promise. The fact that Amphibia exists in the first place gives me hope for more media like it. By now, you already know how much this series means to me, but I don't think you know the extent of everything it's done for me. I don't think it's fair to place the credit for my own improvement and will to live and create on a single piece of media. I know there are plenty of other things that inspire me and keep me going every day, but Amphibia found me again when I needed it most. Have you ever just taken a step back and thought about the life cycle of a frog? It sounds stupid, but just bear with me here. The change that a tadpole goes through in order to metamorphosize into a frog is really interesting. Tadpoles are strictly aquatic, yet they eventually grow legs. Their tails shrink, and skin grows over their gills. They're able to develop things like eardrums and lungs, and eventually, with time, develop a form that allows them to begin a whole new life on land. They originally lacked the ability to even step foot on ground, yet with patience and determination, they adapted and changed to live life somewhere else. Such a change couldn't have been easy. When you've been living underwater your entire life and were physically unable to survive on land, it must be really confusing to all of a sudden biologically change into something that can not only adapt to living on land, but can actively thrive doing so. Frogs are so interesting like that, aren't they? While humans don't grow internal organs or legs, we are constantly changing, on the inside and the outside. Our brains spend decades developing, and even then we never stop learning new things and finding new experiences. Change can be detrimental. Sometimes it can even ruin our lives, but change can also be beautiful. Change can allow us to adapt to entirely different environments. It can allow us to meet new people, forge relationships and bonds we hadn't even known to be possible. Change can allow us to lose those people too. It can take away our happiness. It can drop us into our lowest moments and strip us of our joy and will to live. But it can also bring them back. I've lost a lot of things lately. In the past few years, I've made some of the strongest connections with people I may ever make in my entire life. And I've lost those connections just as easily. I've seen the beauty in the world, but I've also experienced atrocities that have made me lose faith in humanity. But I've also witnessed kindness. I've felt love. Those were all changes I never expected. My relationships with people have changed, but they're not any less stronger. My environment has changed, but it's not any less appealing. These past few months have been maybe some of the hardest of my entire life, and sometimes when I get up, I'm not even sure if I plan on making it to the end of the day. It's the silliest things that give us that push, that motivation to do better. Everything around me is changing rapidly. I've been so afraid of that change and that lack of control that it's driven me to wallow in my own misery. It's had an impact on me and my loved ones, and I've almost given up on everything several different times. But because of this funny little show, I'm learning to take things one step at a time. I'm trying my hardest to live each day to the fullest, to love what I am despite my flaws. It's not easy. Change can suck. But it's also brought all of you here. I'm so eternally grateful for that. I'm so blessed to be able to reach you right now, to tell you things you might really need to hear. I'm no motivational speaker, sure, but I can tell you one thing for certain. No matter what changes in your life, no matter what stays and what leaves, no matter how you feel or where you are, someone loves you. And you might think, who? You might feel you have nothing left. You might feel alone and scared. You might feel hopeless. you might feel just like me. And that's why I want you to know, I love you. I love you so very much. I have no idea who you are, but I love you. And you should start loving yourself too. Because despite everything, despite all the changes you've endured, the pain you fought through, the love you felt, the heartbreak, the loss, the motivation, the hope, the determination, you're still you. Be proud of the change you've experienced. You're so much better and stronger than you were maybe only a year ago. The fact that you're here right now is a testament to your strength. Think about all the good things that life has brought you, all the changes that saved your life. Think about the creations you've made, the things you plan to make. Human creativity is change. A century ago, something like your favorite movie, your favorite show couldn't have even been conceived. When I look at something like Amphibia, something I love and cherish, something that's kept me up at night with how much love I feel for it, I think of all the work and effort that went into it. I think of the lives of every single person who contributed to its creation, so that it could reach me and impact my life too. I think of how it's probably changed the lives of most of the creatives working on it, the same way it's changed mine. Media like this existing is important. It's the beauty in life. Through the change we experience, the hardships we face, we are gifted something so much more important than the pain and suffering we feel. Humanity. Humanity is what allows us to create. The lives we live, the culture we're born into, the people we meet, the things we create and share, that is humanity. That is change. We spend our lives afraid of change, but the beauty of life is the change. And throughout all the differences, the changing of the seasons, the loss of my loved ones, the pain throughout the world, the hunger and loneliness, the hatred and resentment, at the end of the day, I have things I love to keep me in comfort. My life isn't perfect. I don't think anyone's is. But I'm passionate. I take pride in that passion. I love that about myself. I love that I love things so deeply. It's good to take a moment and think about something you actually like about yourself. You. Hey. Yeah, you, watching this video right now. Tell me something you love about yourself. Anything. Your hair, your art, your voice, your humor. Doesn't it just feel nice to think about? I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but I do know that one of my favorite shows of all time will still exist when I wake up. I know that its messages will still stay within me, its characters will still resonate with me, its music will still move me, its creativity will still inspire me. So, at the end of the day, I think I'll be okay, even if I do end up changing.
Change can be difficult, but it's how we grow.
Changing is their normal state, like us. Even if we're not changing on the outside, we're changing on the inside constantly.
We spend our lives afraid of change, but after many years I realized the beauty of life is the change.
But at the same time, I'm really happy that something can make me feel that sad. It's like, it makes me feel alive, you know? It makes me feel human.
What would you do if you were me?
If I had done everything you've done, sleep till I'm 40.
I mean, what should I do with my life?
Maybe start living it?
But does growing up just change your body? Or also your soul?
Telling her might not change anything, but at least you'll have closure.
But you're supposed to change. You're never the same, even moment to moment. You're allowed and expected to invent who you are.
Every day it gets a little easier, but you gotta do it every day. That's the hard part.
It can be the hardest thing to realize you can't hold on to something forever. Sometimes you have to let it go.
There's some stuff about me that I've been ignoring for a long time. I'm afraid of that stuff, but it's part of who I am. As long as I know the shape of my soul, I'll be all right.
You're worth more than what you can give to other people.
Only after you give up everything can you begin to find a way to be happy.
Sometimes life's a bitch and then you keep living.
But of the things you let go,
don't close yourself off. Open your heart and follow it.
A whole chapter of my life was over, but a new one was just beginning.
You'd be surprised what makes its way back to you.
It was nice while it lasted, right?
Sure. It was nice while it lasted.